Chapter 943. Even with Great Xia's industrial standards, it would take 2 months to manufacture a single aircraft, and the amount of precious metals required was uncountable. 100 mimicry flying devices were all that Great Xia could afford to offer. Together with the precious magnetic orbs, each aircraft was worth hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Crashing one was a huge loss. Besides the aircraft, the pilots themselves were also a valuable asset. To train a qualified pilot and a qualified bombardier required at least 3 months of continuous, high-intensity training, and each training was a huge waste of money. It was common for a plane to crash in the middle of training. Thus, the role of the flying squadron in battle was similar to that of a modern strategic bomber. It was not prepared for conventional warfare, nor was it suitable for conventional warfare. Because we can't afford it. No matter how rich Great Xia was, they did not have the resources to play around with hundreds of thousands of gold coins. That is squandering. In order to rescue Lai Hu and the others, the flying squadron had gone all out. After crashing 2 aircraft, they finally managed to carve out a bloody path on the central street. Seeing this, Lai Hu had no time to lament and immediately gave the order to charge. Kill! The 5,000 soaring dragon warriors once again joined together like a rope, piercing into the smoke-filled battlefield like a sharp knife. Taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, they crushed the enemy's defensive line and finally broke out of the encirclement. Wherever the army passed, the streets were a mess. The wreckage of the aircraft, the ruins of the collapsed houses, and the corpses of the enemy soldiers were all mixed together. Dust billowed and blood flowed like rivers. Those who did not know better would have thought that there was an earthquake. Charging out of the city in one breath, the soldiers of the Dragon Stallion army felt the joy of having survived a calamity. But it was quickly followed by a tide-like exhaustion, especially for the injured soldiers. The continuous battles, coupled with the torment of being trapped in a hopeless situation, had squeezed out every last drop of energy from the soldiers. Lai Hu rode on his warhorse. His shiny radiant armor was stained with blood. He glanced at the exhausted soldiers, and a hint of guilt flashed across his eyes. He raised his voice and said, "My sons, grit your teeth and hold on a little longer. We will retreat to Ganluo Pass." The enemy had only been knocked unconscious by the flying squadron and could catch up at any time. Thus, they had not completely escaped the danger. If they gave up now, all their efforts would be for naught. Yes, sir. The Dragon Stallion army truly lived up to their reputation as elite soldiers of 100 battles. Upon receiving this order, all of their originally immobile appearances seemed to suddenly burst forth with new potential, instantly becoming spirited. This kind of battle where they broke through the limits of their physical bodies was also a rare kind of tempering for the soldiers. After this battle, it was likely that many soldiers would use this opportunity to break through their bottlenecks and ascend to the next level. Lai Hu was in a hurry to return because he didn't want the pass that he had worked so hard to take down to change hands again. It was already embarrassing enough that Ganluo City was attacked. If they were to lose Ganluo Pass, which they had taken down with great difficulty, then he would really be too ashamed to face His Majesty and the entire army. The group didn't delay any longer, retreating towards Ganluo Pass. Not long after the Dragon Stallion army had left, Wei Yan personally led his troops in pursuit. As he watched the enemy gradually recede into the distance, Wei Yan shook his head in disappointment, knowing that there was no hope of recovering Ganluo Pass. Seeing this, the deputy general said with a smile, "General, you've dealt a heavy blow to the enemy this time. This is already a great achievement." Wei Yan didn't lack pride in his heart. Being able to dampen the spirit of the insufferably arrogant Great Xia army was enough for Wei Yan to brag about for the rest of his life. Let's also withdraw. Ganluo City didn't have walls and couldn't be defended. This time, the Child Protection Division had suffered a great loss, and once the reinforcements caught up, they would definitely not let the matter rest. Since this was the case, How could Wei Yan continue to stay? In this encirclement of the dragon stallion army, they had only killed 2,000 enemies, while Swordsman City itself had lost more than 4,000 soldiers. If the 2,000 garrison soldiers were included, the losses would be even greater. Fortunately, the greatest significance of this battle was to dampen the spirit of the Great Xia army. Casualties were secondary. Let's go. Wei Yan patted his horse and turned back into the city. Before leaving, Wei Yan ordered the soldiers to carry away the remains of the aircraft that had crashed in the city. This was probably the first time that the Great Xia's mimicry aircraft had fallen outside. Bringing it back to the main city would probably have some research value. The Battle of Ganluo City had thus come to an end. The next day, Hu Yihuang led the middle division of the Dragon Stallion Army's 2nd Legion to Ganluo Pass and rendezvoused with the vanguard. Seeing that Wei Yan's army had retreated, Lai Hu naturally wouldn't be polite and finally captured Ganluo City. Seeing that the Great Xia army had returned while their own army was nowhere to be seen, the citizens of Ganluo City, who had been on tenterhooks for the past 2 days, were in a state of turmoil. Upon reaching the city, Lai Hu's expression turned solemn when he saw that the 2 crashed aircraft had disappeared. He didn't dare to conceal anything and wrote a detailed report of the battle, which he then submitted to the War Zone's command headquarters to await their decision. The news that the Great Xia vanguard had been ambushed in Sichuan and suffered disastrous losses quickly spread throughout the wilderness under the arrangement of some people, causing a huge wave. In the eyes of the outside world, the Great Xia had dispatched 4 field legions, which amounted to nearly 300,000 soldiers. Not to mention the final battle, it shouldn't be difficult for them to take down the checkpoint in front of them. Who knew that there would actually be such a twist? Once the news spread, the people applauded Wei Yan and Swordsman City incessantly. The public opinion in the wilderness was finally not one-sided with the Great Xia, giving Swordsman City some breathing space. This local battle also made the Great Wilderness War even more complicated and confusing. It's still unknown who will emerge victorious. Xiangnan Province, Rosy Cloud City. Seeing that the Great Xia army had suffered a setback in Sichuan, south of Rosy Cloud's confidence was boosted, and he was ready to stroke the tiger's whiskers. Come! Here! South of Rosy Cloud's order the 1st and 2nd Legions to assemble at the designated location and be on standby. Yes. At this juncture, south of Rosy Clouds was ready to wade into these muddy waters. It's good to fish in muddy waters. South of Rosy Clouds revealed a trace of a smile, as if he had a card up his sleeve. No one knew what he was planning. Dali Prefecture, Cloud City. Cloud City was formed by the temporary merger of 4 territories in Dali Prefecture. It had 50,000 soldiers, and its territory included all the territories except for Dali Kingdom and its satellite cities. Its area was second only to Kunming Prefecture. Since the territory had been sold to the Yan Huang Alliance, the Lord of Cloud City, Little Mutuo, no longer had the right to make decisions on his own. On this day, under the instructions of the big boss, Di Chen, Little Mutuo officially submitted an application for asylum to the Dali Imperial Court. After a short while, the Dali Imperial Court approved the application. Under the cover of the night, 50,000 Imperial Guards quietly left the city and rushed to Cloud City to assemble. At the same time, the Lishao Alliance also began to move. They began to deploy elite troops, using the dungeons below as a cover, and left the satellite cities in batches. The Yan Huang Alliance's plans in Dali Prefecture were gradually beginning to unfold. A premeditated storm was about to blow towards the Great Xia. September 21st, Shanghai City, Summer Palace. Upon receiving Lai Hu's battle report and letter of apology, Bai Qi, the commander of the Dragon Stallion Army and commander of the Yunnan Theater of Operations, did not dare to act on his own. Instead, he reported to the Bureau of Military Affairs, asking for instructions on how to deal with Lai Hu. Military Affairs Minister Du Ruhui received the report. His brows were tightly furrowed, and he was similarly hesitant. Lai Hu-er was a general that the king had specially requested from the Great Sui. Upon his arrival, he had been entrusted with a heavy responsibility. Who would have thought that because of a momentary lapse in judgment, he would advance prematurely and make such a grave mistake? At this moment, the one who had lost the most face was probably the king. Thus, Du Ruhui did not want to use this matter to nag the king at this time. But Lai Hu-er was the commander of the army and a fourth-rank general, so the Bureau of Military Affairs had no right to directly punish him. After all the twists and turns, he still had to present the matter to the king. Thus, the monarch and the minister in the imperial study had come up with a proposal. Upon hearing Du Ruhui's report, Ouyang Shua expressionlessly said, "According to military law, a person who underestimated the enemy and advanced prematurely, resulting in a setback in the war and loss of soldiers and generals, should be punished in this manner?" Du Ruhui's heart jumped. Could it be that His Majesty wants to shed tears and behead Ma Su? Reporting to His Majesty, he should be stripped of his title and dismissed from his post, Du Ruhui carefully said. Ouyang Shua nodded and was about to give the order. Seeing this, Du Ruhui clenched her teeth and stepped forward. "His Majesty!" Ouyang Shua frowned. The king's eyes swept over her, causing Du Ruhui's palms to sweat. She braced herself and said, "The battle on the front lines is in full swing, and it is a great taboo to withdraw a general just before a battle. I ask that His Majesty, for the sake of the battle on the front lines, temporarily spare Lai Hu-er so that he can atone for his crimes and be dealt with after the battle." Du Ruhui's words seemed impulsive, but she was actually trying to understand His Majesty's intentions. If His Majesty were to be forced to deal with Lai Hu-er in such a harsh manner, it would be detrimental to His Majesty's sacred reputation. Ouyang Shua gave Du Ruhui a deep look. After thinking for a moment, he turned to Scholar Qingyi of the Pavilion of Secret Texts and said, "Draft an edict." "Yes." Qingyi nodded. "Edict. General Zhen Wei, commander of the 2nd Legion of the Dragon Stallion Army, Lai Hu-er was too eager for quick success and underestimated the enemy, resulting in a setback in the war and the loss of soldiers. His crimes cannot be forgiven. With this, Lai Hu-er is stripped of his position as Legion Commander and demoted to Vice Legion Commander. Hu Yi-huang of the 1st Legion is promoted to Vice Legion Commander, temporarily acting as Legion Commander. At the same time, Lai Hu-er's title of General Zhen Wei is stripped and his salary is forfeited for 1 year as punishment. This was already a heavy punishment that Lai Hu-er would remember for the rest of his life. Du Ruhui couldn't help but bow. His Majesty is wise. Although Lai Hu-er had lost face after being demoted to Vice Legion Commander, he still had a chance to atone for his crimes. Moreover, His Majesty had not appointed a new Legion Commander, so it was clear that he was still giving Lai Hu-er some leeway. Ouyang Shua, however, was not at ease. "Help this king pass on a message to Lai Hu. If he cannot make a contribution in this battle to atone for his crimes, then he will be sent back to the Great Sui after the war." "Yes," Du Ruhui carefully replied, knowing that His Majesty was truly angry this time. If Lai Hu-er really was sent back to the Great Sui, he would probably be too ashamed to show his face in the wilderness and would only be able to commit suicide. Early the next morning, the imperial edict was delivered to Ganluo City. Lai Hu-er received the edict and then listened to His Majesty's verbal edict. His heart was filled with excitement as he knelt on one knee and bowed to the south. Choking with emotion, he said, "Thank you, His Majesty, for your great kindness. This general will definitely sacrifice his life to repay His Majesty's kindness." This time, Lai Hu-er had no way out. Chapter 944. After the messenger left, Hu Yi-huang, who had just been promoted to deputy commander, said with a smile, "General, please rest assured. Although the king has asked me to take charge of the military affairs, all the arrangements in the army are still up to you." Hu Yihuang knew that his ability was not enough to lead an army. Lai Hu was favored by the king. As long as he made meritorious service this time, his position would be restored sooner or later. Lai Hu waved his hand and said, "How can that be? This is the king's order, not a child's play." I was too impulsive. Seeing this, Hu Yihuang knew that he could not make it clear. He would act according to the situation. After the two of them finished speaking, they immediately gathered all the generals and entered the tent to discuss matters, announcing the personnel changes that had just occurred. During the promotion, Hu Yihuang insisted on not sitting in the first seat, but sitting next to Lai Hu. Hu Yihuang also had a reason, so he said with a smile, "We are all deputy commanders, of course we should sit side by side." The other generals saw this and did not have any objections, as if they agreed. Lai Hu was wrong to underestimate the enemy, but according to the surviving soldiers, at the critical moment, the general insisted on not leaving anyone behind. This kind of behavior could easily win the respect of the soldiers. Therefore, although Lai Hu was relieved of his position, in the hearts of the generals, Lai Hu was still their commander. Unexpectedly, Lai Hu stood up and opposed. He said solemnly, "There can only be one voice in the army. Military orders must be obeyed. Since the king has appointed General Hu as the acting commander, General Hu is the only authority in the army. If you still recognize me, please do not put me in an unjust situation." Lai Hu was after all a senior general, so he could see the problem very clearly. The other generals heard this and were even more respectful. They all cupped their fists. "General's order." Even Hu Yihuang's expression was solemn. He solemnly bowed to Lai Hu and sat in the first seat. All the generals sat down and began to discuss the next step of the march plan. What they did not know was that this scene was secretly watched by the military judge. That night, it was written into a secret report and reported to Ouyang Shua. After Ouyang Shua finished reading, he nodded with satisfaction and said with a faint smile, "Not too hot-headed." Qing Yi looked at Ouyang Shua inexplicably and continued to deal with the document. The big imperial study returned to silence again. In the following week, the war in Sichuan, which had just started to stir up some waves, once again accelerated its pace. Unexpectedly, the Great Xia army didn't slow down their attack after suffering a setback. On the contrary, under the unified command of Bai Qi, the left and right vanguards, as well as the left and right protectors, advanced bravely. Their attacks were even more ferocious than before. Bai Qi was very determined. The left vanguard had suffered a setback in Ganluo City, affecting the morale of the entire army. If the entire army became cautious and restrained because of this, their morale would be further affected. Since that was the case, it was better to make some sacrifices in exchange for a hearty victory and raise the morale of the entire army. As expected of the killing god, his heart was ruthless. Not only was he ruthless to his enemies, but he was also ruthless to his dragon stallion army. For the sake of victory, Bai Qi would not be stingy with his sacrifices. When it was time to sacrifice himself, Bai Qi did not even blink. This time, Swordsman City was caught unprepared. With the previous example, it was impossible for Wei Yan to set up an ambush for the Great Xia army. Almost every battle was a tough one, especially the left vanguard led by Lai Hu who fought with all his might. Such a ferocious attack terrified the defenders of Swordsman City. When they reached a nearby pass, the defenders actually resisted for less than half an hour before surrendering. When Wei Yan received the news, he cursed angrily. Feng Qingyang even sent an urgent letter to berate Wei Yan. The previous victory could no longer make them feel proud, only awe and veneration. Not only was the army of Swordsman City terrified, but the cities occupied by Great Xia also strangely became abnormally calm. No one dared to come out and cause trouble. As a result, the supply routes were smooth, and the frontline operations were well supported. Bai Qi's counterattack seemed ordinary, but it hit the nail on the head and turned the tide in one fell swoop. As expected of a divine general. 30th of September, Meishan Pass. Meishan Pass was the only pass leading to Swordsman City from the south of Sichuan. It was also the second largest pass in Jiangyang County. The largest pass was located north of Swordsman City and connected to Qingdu County. The 150,000 Imperial Guards led by Zhao Yun had already arrived at Swordsman City a few days ago and set up camp outside the city. At the same time, the remnants of the 1st and 2nd Legions had also returned to Swordsman City. Up until now, the 2 legions of Swordsman City had a total of 140,000 soldiers, but less than 50,000 had actually returned to Swordsman City. The rest were either killed or captured. Swordsman City had already lost more than half of the war. This morning, after paying the price of nearly 30,000 casualties, the left and right vanguards of Great Xia finally met in front of Meishan Pass outside Swordsman City. The left and right protectors would also arrive in a few days. So far, the entire Jiangyang County, except for Swordsman City, had been conquered by Great Xia. The real war was about to begin, and Swordsman City naturally became the focus of the entire wilderness. Dali County, Cloud City. A few mysterious people were gathered in the mayor's residence. A few days ago, the coalition army consisting of 50,000 territorial troops, 50,000 Imperial Guards, and 100,000 combat players of the Shao Alliance had quietly assembled in Cloud City. However, there had to be a plan for how this war should be fought. Among these people, there was the Lord of Cloud City, Little Mu Tuo, the General of Dali who commanded the Imperial Guards, and the Chief of the Shao Alliance, Shao Nianying. The last person was the most special. It was Wang Meng of Handan City. Wang Meng represented the Yan-Huang Alliance in Cloud City and was in charge of commanding this war. As the local tyrant, Little Mu Tuo took the lead and introduced, starting from Cloud City, we can attack Dongchuan County in the north, Kunming County in the east, and Tingyue County in the south. I wonder which one should we choose? As Little Mu Tuo spoke, he turned his gaze to Wang Meng. Wang Meng, as his name suggested, was a first-class fierce man. He was well versed in both literature and martial art. No one present had any objections to him being sent by Di Chen to command this war. Dongchuan County. Wang Meng didn't hesitate at all and gave the answer directly. Little Mu Tuo smiled and said, I'd like to hear your opinion. Wang Meng wasn't arrogant. He smiled and explained, Tingyue County is located in a remote area, and there's no point in conquering it. There's Lingxi City in Kunming County, and there's a teleportation array in Lingxi City. If we really force Great Xia into a corner, I'm afraid it'll be difficult. After thinking about it, we can only attack Dongchuan County. Little Mu Tuo and the others nodded in agreement. Then, what's the point of attacking Dongchuan County? Little Mu Tuo didn't believe that Wang Meng wanted to attack Dongchuan County just because of elimination. Wang Meng said, Bai Qi is in Dongchuan County. This time, we want to capture Bai Qi alive. That's a good idea. Little Mu Tuo laughed. Bai Qi's name was well known in the wilderness. If they could really capture Bai Qi alive, it would be a big reward. Wang Meng continued, Of course, capturing Bai Qi alive is just a side goal. As long as we take down Dongchuan County, it'll be equivalent to cutting off the connection between Great Xia and Shu. In that case, the 300,000 soldiers that Great Xia left in Shu will have no backup. They'll be attacked from both sides and will definitely be buried in Shu. Little Mu Tuo's heart trembled. Indeed ruthless. At this moment, the true purpose of the Yan-Huang Alliance was exposed. If it was really like what Wang Meng said, they could destroy the Dragon Xiang army of Great Xia in one fell swoop, it would be equivalent to destroying one of the pillars of the Great Xia army. The vast Great Xia's border defense would be stretched thin. Little Mu Tua concluded that when that time came, the Yan-Huang alliance would definitely make follow-up move. For example, they would incite the surrounding enemies of Great Xia to attack Great Xia together. At that time, Great Xia would probably really be eaten by a pack of wolves. Thinking of this, Little Mu Tua shuddered, and there was a faint trace of excitement in his heart. Little Mu Tua, a former member of the Yunnan city-state, naturally didn't have a good impression of Great Xia and Ouyang Shu. Not only did he not have a good impression, he even hated them to the bone. If they could really overthrow Great Xia, Little Mu Tua would definitely be the first to take the vanguard. Clap clap, Little Mu Tua couldn't help but clap his hands and said with a smile, "General Wang is indeed brilliant. I agree." Agree. Xiao Nianying and the others couldn't hide their excitement. These were all enemies of Great Xia. Seeing this, Wang Meng said with a smile, "Okay, then it's settled." The plan had been decided. The 200,000 troops moved at night and moved toward the border between Dali County and Dongchuan County. Dongchuan County, Yongren City. For Great Xia, Yongren City was a special existence. During the previous war in Yunnan, the Imperial Guards led by Hua Tsubing suffered their first defeat outside Yongren City. Because Yongren City was located at the border, north of which was Steel City, Bai Qi set up the headquarters for this attack on Shu. In addition to the headquarters, the supplies and fodder supplied to the frontline army also used Yongren City as the logistics hub. A large number of supplies and fodder were continuously transported from all over Yunnan province to Yongren City, and then from Yongren City to Shu. It was night in a secluded house somewhere in the west of the city. Just as Wang Meng and the others were having a secret discussion, Bai Qi, who had been schemed against by them, was also here. He was secretly meeting with the newly appointed commander of the 4th Imperial Guard Corps, Eli. "General Wu Wei, how is your unit?" Bai Qi sat upright in the seat of honor, his expression solemn and his face serious. This was Bai Qi. As long as he was in the army, he had no fun at all. During this period of time, there had been a series of wars in Shu, and the 4 major provinces of Great Xia were also busy disbanding the prefectural guard divisions. The official roads were filled with officers and soldiers of the garrison division. The tension of the war at the front was in sharp contrast to the leisurely disarmament in the rear. It was precisely by taking advantage of the chaotic scene in the rear that the 70,000 battle-hardened elite soldiers selected from the 3 major armies, mixed in with the officers and soldiers of the garrison division, rushed to Dongchuan County without leaving a trace. Hearing Bai Qi's question, Eli cupped his fists and said, "Reporting to the Commander-in-Chief, my unit has already assembled in Dongchuan County. In order not to attract attention, we are still scattered in various cities for the time being. As for what to do next, I await the Commander-in-Chief's instructions." Bai Qi nodded with satisfaction and said, "Very good. From now on, you will inform all the units to quietly assemble in Yongren City and hide in the forest outside the city. Remember, you must be hidden." Eli was startled and wanted to ask for the reason, but when he remembered that the king had instructed him to listen to Commander Bai Qi's orders, he suppressed the doubts in his heart and simply gave a military salute. "Yes, General." Bai Qi nodded again with satisfaction. Chapter 945. After Eli left, the deputy commander of the Dragon Stallion Army's 1st Legion, Zhao Bonu, walked in. This historically important general under Hua Tsubing had now become an important assistant to Bai Qi. To be able to serve under 2 divine generals, Zhao Bonu could be considered quite a legend. "Marshal, isn't this too risky?" Zhao Bonu clearly knew of Plan B, but he still couldn't conceal his worry. It is a great taboo for Marshal to put himself in danger. This wasn't the first time Zhao Bonu had mentioned this, but Bai Qi wouldn't listen. As expected, Bai Qi waved his hand once more, resolutely saying, "There's no need to persuade me, I've already made up my mind. Dongchuan Commandery is still too big, and this is the only way to lead the Dali coalition to a fixed location. Plan B was just a general plan drawn up by the Grand Council, and the specifics still depended on Bai Qi's last-minute arrangements. The greatest difficulty in this plan was how to get the Dali coalition to attack a specific target according to the Great Xia's intentions. Otherwise, the Imperial Guard under Eli would never be able to set up an ambush. Yunnan province was vast and had more than 100 cities. Achieving this was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Thus, Bai Qi's first plan was to take advantage of the tense situation in Sichuan to move the frontline command center from Lingxi City to Yongren City in Dongchuan Commandery. If Bai Qi had been stationed at Lingxi City, the Dali coalition would never have dared to attack it. Thus, Wang Meng's so-called strategic analysis had long since fallen into Bai Qi's trap. This was precisely why Ouyang Shua trusted Bai Qi. Besides his title as the god of slaughter, Bai Qi had another unique combat trait that was easily overlooked: his machine-like calculation and deduction. This wooden commander of the army would spend his days pondering the situation of both sides, combining all kinds of intelligence to calculate the battle situation in his mind. The historical Battle of Chongping was the pinnacle of this kind of deduction. Killing was just a facade, or rather, a facade. This time, Bai Qi had calculated that the only way to beautifully complete Plan B was to use himself as bait. Just as Zhao Bonu had said, this was very risky. Only the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd divisions of the Dragon Stallion Army's 1st Legion were garrisoned in Eternal Benevolence City. Adding in the brigades directly under the 1st Legion, there were only 43,000 soldiers. Excluding the engineers, medics, scouts, and other auxiliary troops, there were only around 35,000 soldiers in the army. With just over 30,000 people, and relying on Yongren City, which wasn't even considered a strong city, they had to resist the siege of 200,000 enemies. Just the thought of it made them feel uneasy. If anything went wrong, the city would be breached by the enemy, and Bai Qi and the others would not be able to escape the fate of being captured. Bai Qi wasn't a brute, and every decision he made was backed by precise calculations. He glanced at Zhao Bonu and said, "Since there's still time, you should personally inspect the city's defenses. Whether or not we can block the first wave of the enemy's attack depends on the city's defenses. We must not be careless." "Yes, sir." Seeing this, Zhao Bonu could only retreat helplessly. Under the dim candlelight, Bai Qi continued to write and draw on the table. It was unknown what he was planning. Time flowed like water. September of the 4th year of Gaia passed quietly. It had been more than a month since Great Xia initiated a war that affected the entire wilderness. The land of Bashu was full of spiritual beauty. Danling Basin, where Swordsman City was located, covered an area of nearly 40,000 square kilometers. Although it couldn't compare to the vast Lianzhou Basin, it was still incomparably vast, with no end in sight. In the center of the basin was the towering Swordsman City, a bright pearl in the land of Sichuan. On the 1st of October, after an intense battle, Great Xia's left and right vanguard troops jointly took down Maishan Pass and officially entered Danling Basin. The army used Maishan Pass as a barrier and set up camp at the southern side of Danling Basin. Swordsman City was 50 kilometers away from the main camp, and Zhao Yun's camp was 10 kilometers south of Swordsman City. This meant that the two camps were less than 40 kilometers away from each other, and a war was about to break out. In the afternoon of the next day, Great Xia's left and right Guardian troops arrived at Maishan Pass and set up camp at the flanks of the left and right vanguard troop. As such, the 4-field corps of Great Xia's Longxiang army set up camp at the southern outskirts of Danling Basin. Their tents stretched for dozens of kilometers, almost covering the entire southern outskirt. After nearly a month of fierce fighting, the left and right vanguard troops had lost more than 30,000 men. Although the task of the left and right Guardian troops wasn't as arduous as that of the vanguard troops, they still lost more than 10,000 men. Including the troops stationed at the various passes and cities, only 220,000 soldiers had actually arrived at the Pil Ridge Basin to join forces. This was even after Bai Qi had arranged for 2 divisions of the 1st Legion to enter Sichuan and supervise the transportation of provisions. Otherwise, the Dragon Stallion army wouldn't have been able to send more than 200,000 soldiers to the decisive battle. Swordsman City had the 150,000 Imperial Guards of the Shu Han dynasty, the 50,000 remaining territorial troops, and the Imperial Guard division responsible for surrounding and protecting Swordsman City. Their total strength was around 210,000. In comparison, both sides seemed to be evenly matched. Moreover, Swordsman City could defend the city and had the home advantage. It would be extremely difficult for Great Xia to take down Swordsman City. Thus, after the Dragon Stallion army took Meishan Pass and arrived at Danling Basin, they weren't in a hurry to start a decisive battle. Instead, they built their tents and reorganized their armaments, seemingly prepared for a protracted battle. At the same time, an innumerable amount of rations and fodder was being transported to the front line from the cities of Dongchuan County and Jiangyang County through the temporary recruitment of more than 200,000 laborers. The Great Xia army wasn't in a hurry, and neither was Feng Qingyang. Yesterday, Di Chen and the others had already told Feng Qingyang that once the decisive battle started, they would suddenly deploy 100,000 soldiers to Swordsman City and catch Great Xia off guard. With 100,000 soldiers supporting them, their total military strength would be able to crush the Great Xia army on the opposite side. Moreover, they had a strong city to defend. Feng Qingyang didn't have to be in a hurry. All he had to do was wait patiently for the Great Xia army to take the initiative to attack. Most importantly, Di Chen had finally revealed to Feng Qingyang the Dali plan that he had been planning for a long time. Once the Dali allied forces broke through Dongchuan County and cut off the Great Xia army's retreat, Swordsman City would truly be free of worries. Not only that, but Feng Qingyang would also be able to recover the cities that Great Xia had conquered. He might even be able to use this opportunity to incorporate the opposing Dragon Stallion army and increase the military strength of Swordsman City. At the thought of this, Feng Qingyang was secretly delighted. "Old fox, this time I will pull off your foxtail." Feng Qingyang gazed into the distance as if he could already see the moment of revenge. It was truly wonderful. As such, the 2 warring parties were in a stalemate, but no one knew who would break the stalemate. The variable of the war was in Dali, in Dongchuan County. Just as the Dragon Stallion army and Swordsman City were in a stalemate, a piece of news suddenly pierced through the skies of the wilderness. October 3rd, a very ordinary day, was destined to be recorded in the annals of the wilderness. On this very morning, a 200,000-strong allied force consisting of Cloud City, the Dali Imperial Court, and the Shao Alliance brazenly crossed the border and invaded Dongchuan County of Great Xia's Yunnan province, initiating a war with Great Xia. Like a world-destroying flood, the 200,000-strong army surged into Dongchuan County and set off a cloud of smoke. The vanguard of the army headed straight for Yongren City, which was located in the northernmost part of Dongchuan County. The Allied forces even shouted the war cry of "Capture Bai Qi alive" in a loud and clear manner. In the face of such a large army, the various prefectures and counties of Dongchuan County, which had just had their guards removed, could only tremble under the enemy's iron hooves. Of course, even if the guards were not removed, it would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. After receiving the news, the magistrates and county magistrates of Dongchuan County, as local officials, were either prepared to die or had thoughts of offering their cities to surrender. Against their mortal enemy, Great Xia, the allied forces of Dali didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. Wherever the army passed, the people were plunged into misery and suffering, and blood flowed like a river. It was almost like the end of the world. To the people of Great Xia, who had gradually become accustomed to peaceful days, this was undoubtedly a bolt from the blue. Fortunately, the Allied forces of Dali were in a hurry. They wanted to surround Yongren City before Bai Qi could react, so they didn't want to delay on the way. Otherwise, Dongchuan County would be ruined. In contrast, the army of Great Xia could really be called a benevolent and righteous army. As soon as the news of the Allied forces of Dali came out, the entire wilderness was shaken and everyone was shocked. Is Dali crazy? They actually dared to take the initiative to provoke Great Xia? Seeing that the army of Great Xia was winning in Sichuan, the players of the China region were already certain that Great Xia would be able to capture Swordsman City. Who would have thought that the Allied forces of Dali would appear at this time? Yunqing, what kind of place is that? Yunqing, the leader of this battle, was not known to the outside world at all. It was unknown and many onlookers were baffled. Haha, this is going to be a good show. This is the first time that Great Xia is being invaded by an enemy, right? I don't know how angry Emperor Xia will be. I'm afraid that blood will flow for thousands of miles. Everyone knew Ouyang Shua's character. After suffering a loss, he would definitely fight back ruthlessly. Daring to touch the buttocks of a tiger, little Mutuo has guts. Just based on this, I'm convinced. This time, the Lord of Yunqing, Little Mutuo, became famous after this battle. Waiting for the tiger to show its might. Although the Allied forces of Dali were mighty, the outside world wasn't that worried about Great Xia. Those who knew a little about the inside story knew that there were still 3 Imperial Guard Corps guarding the capital of Great Xia. After a series of battles, the Imperial Guard of Great Xia had long become synonymous with the strongest force in the wilderness. Once the Imperial Guard is out, who dares to compete? With the Imperial Guard of Great Xia, it was like having a stabilizing force. Precisely because of this, the outside world was generally not optimistic about the Allied forces of Dali that suddenly appeared in their field of vision. However, at this moment there was a continuous stream of news. Almost at the same time, in the 5 major provinces of the capital, Donghai, Jiangnan, Jingchu, and Guangxi, the armies of the Yan-Huang alliance stationed at the borders changed their previous passive defense and began to frequently mobilize and provoke at the borders. Looking at the direction of the wind, the Yan-Huang alliance seemed to be preparing for an all-out attack. This caused the pressure on Wanshi City, West Chu, and other allies of Great Xia to multiply, and the morale of the army to be unstable. Without a doubt, the Yan-Huang alliance had an ulterior motive. They wanted to exert pressure on the allies of Great Xia in order to restrain the Imperial Guard of Great Xia and prevent them from reinforcing Dongchuan County. Chapter 946. The threat from the Yan-Huang alliance wasn't completely useless. After learning that the 200,000-strong allied army of Dali had attacked Dongchuan Prefecture, Great Xia only sent 30,000 Tiger Leopard cavalry, personally led by General Ma Chao, from Lingxi City to Dongchuan Prefecture to rescue the commander of the Imperial Guards, Bai Qi. More than 80% of the Imperial Guards remained in Shanghai City, intimidating the entire wilderness. Hearing this news, Di Chen, Wang Meng, and the others all heaved a sigh of relief. From Di Chen's point of view, it would be strange if Great Xia did not send troops to rescue Bai Qi. There must be a trap. The fact that Great Xia sent the Imperial Guards to rescue Bai Qi meant that Great Xia was really caught unprepared. The show is about to begin. In the study of Handan City, Di Chen was excited, his eyes flashing with unconcealable excitement. Di Chen was already imagining the wonderful future of Great Xia with the Battle of Yongren City as an opportunity. Peerless Elegance saw this and smiled. The entire plan of the Yan-Huang alliance was made by Peerless Elegance. When a woman was ruthless, it could make people's hearts turn cold. Wang Meng was at ease because in his view, the 30,000 Imperial Guards were not enough to turn the situation around. At night, the army that had been looting for an entire day was resting in the wilderness. In just one day, more than 10,000 innocent people in Dongchuan Prefecture lost their lives under the butcher knife of the Allied forces. The gold, silver, and jewelry looted were innumerable. Shops, treasuries, and even private residences suffered a calamity. With the satisfaction of the looting, the vast army celebrated in the military camp. For the Yen-Huang alliance, this was a great achievement and was indeed worth celebrating. In the central military tent, Wang Meng and the others gathered again. Because of the victory, during the day, little Mu Tuo and the others could not hide their pride and excitement. Especially little Mu Tuo, who was just a small lord. He was too proud to be on such a big stage, so he got carried away with the victory. During the day's looting, the territorial army of Cloud City was the ugliest. It was the Cloud City army that broke into the residences. Even the members of the Shao Alliance weren't so unscrupulous. They looked at the Cloud City army with disdain, and there were even people discussing in secret. No wonder Cloud City can only hide in Dali Prefecture. This kind of trash isn't even qualified to carry the shoes of the Great Xia army. These words were so vicious that the surrounding players burst into laughter. What kind of lord leads what kind of soldiers? This saying is true. Ha! Another burst of laughter rang out. Adventurer players were unscrupulous by nature. They said whatever they thought. Although they were members of the Shao Alliance, they admired Not Clothes, who was an ambitious and ruthless person in this chaotic world. Of course, admiration was one thing, but he still had to do what he had to do. Seeing that everyone had settled down, Wang Meng sat on the seat of honor and gestured for everyone to be quiet. Everyone knows, right? Great Xia has already sent 30,000 tiger leopard cavalry to Lingxi City, and they will catch up in a few days. Shao Nianying and the others nodded, and their expressions gradually changed from relaxed to solemn. They knew that even though the Imperial Guards of Great Xia were still in Lingxi City, the ones who came this time around were the famous Tiger Leopard Cavalry. Their speed was extremely fast, and they would be able to catch up very quickly. They didn't have much time left. When Wang Meng saw this, he didn't waste any time and said directly, "Since everyone understands the crux of the matter, I won't say anything more. In order to save time, we won't enter the city from tomorrow onwards. We'll try to reach Yongren City within 2 days." Shao Nianying and the others nodded in agreement with Wang Meng's arrangement. "General, rest assured, we know what to do." Although looting along the way was carefree, Shao Nianying and the others weren't short-sighted people. Taking down Yongren City was the top priority. Otherwise, everything would be over. Only the small wooden Tuo was somewhat unwilling, but no one cared about it. Wang Meng looked at the commander of the Imperial Guards of Great Li and said sincerely, "General, please lead the troops as the vanguard and surround Yongren City in advance. It's best to take down Yongren City before the Imperial Guards of Great Xia arrive." Yes. The commander of the Imperial Guards was extremely cool. He cupped his fists and didn't say anything else. Born in the Imperial Guards of Royal City, this general didn't like the matter of the army slaughtering the people, so naturally, he didn't give Wang Meng and the others a good look. If it wasn't for the fact that the imperial order couldn't be disobeyed, this general would have already flared up. It was precisely because of this that Wang Meng named the Imperial Guards of Great Li as the vanguard. From this, it could be seen that Wang Meng could see through the psychology of everyone present. With the plan settled, everyone dispersed. Early the next morning, the army really did speed up, running along the official road, circling around the city and heading straight for Yongren City. On the evening of the 5th of the 10th month, the vanguard of the Allied army had already arrived at Yongren City. The Battle of Yongren City was about to begin. October 6th, Yongren City. As a border city, Yongren City had suffered many disasters. Even now, the scars left over from the previous battle were still visible on the walls, giving it an air of vicissitudes. Atop the walls, the banners of the Dragon Stallion army fluttered in the wind. The 30,000 soldiers of the Dragon Stallion army were arrayed on all 4 sides of the walls, their armor cold as ice as they stood ready for battle. Outside the walls was yet another wondrous sight. Early in the morning, besides the 50,000 vanguard troops that had arrived the night before, the official road leading to Yongren City was now filled with a steady stream of armored soldiers. Due to the sheer number of soldiers, the entire road was filled with them. They were like a huge black dragon, twisting and turning as they headed into the distance. Mixed in with the regular army were mutants in various colors. The equipment of the adventurers was custom-made, so they naturally did not wear the same uniform as the regular army. At first glance, they looked like a group of beggars. In terms of military might and appearance, these mutants naturally could not compare to the regular army. As time passed, more and more troops gathered outside Yongren City, first in the southern outskirts, and then the southern wilderness was quickly filled with soldiers. Seeing this, the army began to move to the east and west, as well as the northern outskirts. By 11 o'clock in the morning, the wilderness surrounding Yongren City had been completely surrounded by soldiers. From east to west, from north to south, there was a dense army, sabers, spears, banners, clanging armor, all of them exuding an invisible pressure. The 200,000 soldiers were like the emissaries of the devil, intent on swallowing Yongren City. Because they had just arrived, the barracks outside the city were bustling with noise like a bustling market. The southern outskirts, the central barrack. After settling down the various troops, Wang Meng once more gathered everyone for a final mobilization before the battle. Strange, why hasn't Bai Qi withdrawn? As soon as he sat down, little Mu Tuo voiced his doubts. If it were him, he would have long since abandoned the city. Using himself as a measure, little Mu Tuo asked, could there be a trap? Or has Bai Qi already quietly left? Xiao Nianying and the others were also bewildered and looked at Wang Meng, waiting for him to make a decision. Wang Meng, on the other hand, was rather calm. He smiled and said, Bai Qi is definitely still in the city. Why? Little Mu Tuo asked. Wang Meng explained, Yongren City is not only the frontline command center of the Great Xia Army, but also the main logistics base of the Dragon Stallion Army. Once Bai Qi abandons the city, Yongren City will fall into our hands, and the Dragon Stallion Army that remains in Shu will starve and be defeated without a fight. Given Bai Qi's arrogance, he definitely won't abandon the city. Little Mu Tuo and the others finally understood, and their worried hearts were once again put at ease. This battle was truly of great importance. Although these core figures seemed to be enjoying themselves, they had actually been under tremendous pressure. Seeing this, Wang Meng suddenly smiled and said, let's not just sit here. Let's go out and take a look. With that, he took the lead and walked out of the camp. Wang Meng was doing this to reduce the pressure on everyone. In order to make it easier to command, the central camp was set up on a small hill in the southern suburbs of Yongren City. From a high vantage point, one could clearly see the entire camp at the foot of the hill. Tens of thousands of camps rose and fell according to the terrain, neatly arranged. Seeing such a formation, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of lofty aspiration. Wang Meng pointed at the army below and said with a smile, with such an army, what is there to worry about? That's right, the one we should be worried about now is Bai Qi. Little Mu Tuo echoed, a trace of delight flashing across his face. Xiao Nianying's eyes flashed with disdain when he saw this. Xiao Nianying came from a prestigious aristocratic family, and he looked down on people like little Mu Tuo. Even towards Ouyang Shuo, who was already famous all over the world, Xiao Nianying didn't have much admiration in his heart. He often said to his family, how can he say that he has no clothes? He just got lucky, and now he's stepping on our aristocratic families. Just as Xiao Nianying was lost in thought, the voice of the commander of the greatly imperial guards came to his ears. Look, what are those protruding things on top of the city walls? Everyone looked in the direction the general was pointing at, and sure enough, on top of Yongren City's city walls, there was a huge protruding thing every 2 meters or so. It was just that these things were covered by sackcloth, and no one knew what they were. Since they were covered, who would know what they were? Little Mu Tua pretended to be disdainful and said, "Humph, who cares what they are, they're just deliberately mystifying things." Although he said this, it wasn't hard to hear the nervousness and uneasiness in Little Mu Tuo's voice. Bai Qi was a divine general, how could he do such a senseless thing? He must have some secret weapon. Little Mu Tua had already faintly guessed what might be under the sackcloth, but out of the mentality of an ostrich, Little Mu Tua didn't want to think about it in detail, and was even more afraid of saying the answer. Xiao Nianying might have also guessed it, but he didn't say it out loud. The only one present who didn't understand was probably the commander of the Imperial Guards. He widened his eyes, trying to get an answer from Wang Meng and the others. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became strange. Cough. Wang Meng's expression was also a bit awkward. He broke the silence, pretending to be relaxed and said, "Don't worry about them, the army has gathered, the arrow is knocked on the bowstring, we have no choice but to release it. War is a competition of strength, our army has the numbers to crush the enemy can't play any trick." What the general said is right. Little Mu Tua and Xiao Nianying agreed, their nervous mood also slightly eased. Only the general of the Imperial Guards was still frowning, but no one answered his questions. Chapter 947. In October, the weather suddenly became cooler. Even at noon, it wasn't that hot. However, the atmosphere outside Yongren City was extremely warm. Heat waves rolled and crowds surged. The 200,000-strong Dali allied army surrounded Yongren City, and one army after another lined up outside the city. Mixed in the middle of the army formation were siege vehicles, mobile arrow towers, siege awls, and other siege weapons. Under the front row of soldiers, there were simple siege ladders. The 200,000 soldiers were ready to set off, and they were only waiting for the order to launch an all-out attack on Yongren City. In the southern barracks, Wang Meng stood at the highest point of a small hill. Xiao Nianying and the others stood in a row behind Wang Meng, staring at the battlefield and the nearby Yongren City. It was everyone's first time commanding 200,000-strong army to attack a city, so they were very excited. Even the usually arrogant Xiao Nianying couldn't hide his excitement. As an adventurer player, he never had the chance to participate in such a big scene before. In comparison, the battle of adventurer players was like playing house. After observing for a while, Xiao Nianying finally saw Bai Qi on the city gate tower in the distance and said with a smile, "I really don't know where Bai Qi gets his confidence from, is he really not afraid of death?" Little Mu Tua joked, "I think it's not that he's not afraid of death, but he's already prepared to change sides. Even if he changes sides, it won't be your turn. Your temple is too small, it can't accommodate a god like Bai Qi." Xiao Nianying didn't give any face to Little Mu Tua, causing the latter's expression to suddenly become extremely ugly. Xiao Nianying didn't care, and his expression was calm. Seeing this, Wang Meng looked up at the sky. It was already high in the sky, and he gave the order, "Sound the drums." Dong, dong, dong. Upon receiving the order, the two largest war drums erected in the middle of the camp started to beat. Upon receiving the signal, the war drums set up at the front lines started to beat one after another, sounding the same rhythm. The drums were playing the song of Emperor Qin breaking the formation. The deafening sound of the drum contained an uplifting power. Listening to the blood-boiling war drums, the front row of sword and shield soldiers hit their shields with their swords, and let out beast-like roars. Ha! 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 The roars of tens of thousands of people, together with the sound of the drums, shook the surroundings and reverberated between the mountains. Some birds were startled, but just as they flew into the air, it was as if they had been shot by an invisible arrow, and fell into the grass. This sound formed an earth-shattering momentum that rushed towards the dragon stallion army, causing everyone's expression to change. Even with the dragon stallion army's strength, they were afraid in the face of such a formation. The citizens of Yongren City were even more frightened. Seeing this, Wang Meng smiled in satisfaction and ordered, "Attack!" The sound of the drums changed and became hurried. The messenger, who was already prepared, waved a red flag up and down and gave the order to attack. Stallion Lang, the troops were sent. Receiving the order, the general waved his long saber and roared, "Attack!" The city was like ant, the city like an and like and tight. Dragon and was and the wrens. The impenetrable encirclement was like a pocket, constantly tightening and threatening to swallow Yongren City. Every time the army took a step forward, the uniform stomping of their feet would cause the ground to tremble. The trembling contained a power that could destroy the world, and no one could stop it. Seeing this, Wang Meng turned to little Mu Tuo and the others and said with a smile, "Everyone, you have managed your troops well." Little Mu Tuo and the others had proud expressions on their faces. Putting everything else aside, just by looking at the current situation, the 200,000-strong army really did seem like a well-trained elite force. Wang Meng was even more confident in taking down Yongren City. While they were talking, the vanguard had already reached 500 meters from the city walls. If they advanced any further, they would enter the enemy's firing range. Wang Meng gave the order, and the sound of the war drums changed again, becoming more and more hurried. The commander of the front line received the signal. He waved his sword and shouted, "Charge! Kill!" The army suddenly sped up, turning from walking to running as they charged toward the city walls with all their strength. This was the most dangerous part. The earlier they reached the foot of the city walls, the safer they would be. The vast army surged forward like a black torrent. At the top of Yongren City, Bai Qi stood in the center of the city tower like a javelin. Bai Qi had personally experienced bigger scenes, so the formation outside the city did not faze him at all. When the enemy entered the 1,000-meter range, Bai Qi lightly spat out 2 words, "Get ready." This order was very vague, but the people below understood. With a swoosh, the large objects covered by linen on the city walls were revealed one by one. Naturally, they were Z1 cannons. A rough count showed that there were no less than 500 cannons on the 4 walls. This was the entire stock of Steel City's cannon manufacturing base, and Bai Qi had taken it all. The black muzzles of the cannons were aimed outside the city, sending chills down people's spines. This was a natural deterrent from firearms. When the enemy entered the 500-meter range, without Bai Qi's order, the 500 cannons opened fire, focusing on the siege vehicles and the mobile arrow towers. Boom, boom, boom. The cannonballs drew a beautiful arc in the air and accurately hit the siege vehicles. The Z1 cannons had long since abandoned the outdated solid bullets and used bombs filled with gunpowder. Once they hit the target, they would immediately explode, creating a huge impact. With a crash, the siege vehicle that was shot broke into 2 and was scrapped on the spot. The broken siege vehicle fell down and smashed into the dense crowd, causing chaos and dust to fly everywhere. The shock wave from the explosion of the bomb, along with the high-speed shrapnel, instantly killed a large number of people. The exploding cannonballs were like fireworks, exploding in the vast army formation and causing the army to stagnate. The morale that had just been gathered was immediately hit hard. A rough estimate was that in this round of attack alone, more than 300 siege vehicles and mobile arrow towers were hit by the cannonballs, and more than 200 were scrapped on the spot. While the Allied forces were in a daze, the bombardment continued. Without a doubt, this was a show of strength prepared by the Great Xia army to the Dali Allied forces. Seeing that the cannons at the top of Yongren City had revealed themselves, Wang Meng and the others, who had been paying attention to the battlefield, narrowed their eyes. Even so, Wang Meng remained unmoved, and the rapid sound of the war drums continued to ring out. Wang Meng was already prepared to sacrifice himself. As long as they achieved their strategic objective, everything was worth it for the Yan-Huang alliance. Therefore, while the front-line troops were hesitating, Wang Meng gave the order to attack. Under this order, Anyone who dared to retreat would be executed without mercy. Kill! The Allied forces weren't cowards and wouldn't be easily frightened. Once the order was given, the army braved the cannons and launched a fierce attack on Yongren City, rushing to the foot of the city wall in an instant. In the process, a small half of the siege vehicles were destroyed by the cannons. Clatter! 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 Without the siege vehicles, the simple siege ladders came in handy. Simple and crude. The Dragon Stallion army didn't stand on ceremony and cooperated with the cannons, shooting arrows, throwing stones, rolling logs and other defensive supplies, or even pouring oil. They were simply and scrupulous. In a short period of time, the Allied forces suffered heavy casualties, and the first wave of attack suffered a heavy setback. In just an hour, more than 20,000 people had died on the battlefield. Even so, the Allied forces didn't fear death. Wang Meng was even more unmoved. He ordered, "Continue the attack." As the attackers, everyone present had long since prepared themselves to sacrifice a portion of their forces. It was just a matter of whether or not this sacrifice exceeded the limits of what they could bear. At this time, Yongren City was like a meat grinder, constantly devouring the lives of the enemy. Seeing this, the small wooden Tuo's face paled. He still hadn't gotten used to this kind of bloody scene. In his territory, the small wooden Tuo had never personally led an army into battle. Under the fearless assault of the Allied forces, the top of Yongren City was in constant danger. This was especially true of the 100,000 mutants, which gave the Dragon Stallion army a headache. These mutants were skilled in martial arts and easily charged to the top of the city wall. If not for the fact that the Dragon Stallion army also possessed extraordinary strength, it was hard to say what would have happened. Seeing this, Wang Meng's lips curved into a slight smile. As long as we aren't afraid of sacrifice, there's no city that can't be taken. But Xiao Nianying's expression was somewhat unnatural. The enormous sacrifice was beginning to hit his bottom line. Xiao Alliance's players were the guild's elite backbones. Before they came, the guild had even promised them generous death compensation and a reward mechanism for battle achievements. Otherwise, how could these players be so willing to do business for Xiao Nianying? But if there really was a large number of casualties, the Xiao Alliance wouldn't be able to afford the compensation. The price of a player's death was too high, so the compensation was naturally different from that of the army. The basic compensation for a player's death was 500 gold coins, and this didn't include equipment, techniques, and other compensation. They also had to arrange for a special team to take these newbies to level up. Before setting off, Xiao Nianying had calculated that if the losses in this battle exceeded 10,000, the Xiao Alliance would collapse. But the current situation didn't seem very good at all. As the battle progressed, Xiao Nianying's expression grew more and more serious. Seeing this, the small wooden Tuo's eyes flashed with an almost imperceptible joy. The small wooden Tuo could be said to have a grudge against Xiao Nianying. Of everyone present, besides Wang Meng, the small wooden Tuo was the most relaxed. The moment he had agreed to the Yan-Huang Alliance's conditions, the small wooden Tuo had been very clear that the life and death of Cloud City no longer had much to do with him as its lord. Regardless of the outcome of this battle, the small wooden Tuo had to hand over the leadership of Cloud City. With the nature of the Yan-Huang Alliance, having spent a large amount of money, they naturally wouldn't leave without any interest. Just as the few of them were thinking about their own matters, the siege gradually entered a critical moment. In order to take down Eternal Benevolent City as soon as possible, to prevent any undue delay from causing trouble, Wang Meng had a heart of stone. Without even blinking, he constantly sent groups of soldiers to the front line. The 200,000 soldiers were distributed in 4 directions, and on average, there were 50,000 soldiers on each side. These 50,000 soldiers were divided into 5 groups of 10,000, arranged in a 2-to-2 formation. They were the front army, the middle army, and the last reserve army. The front army's attack was thwarted, and Wang Meng ordered the middle army to follow. In this way, the number of troops participating in the siege was in the hundreds of thousands, densely surrounding the four sides of the city walls. As far as the eye could see, at the foot of each section of the city wall, there were groups of troops waiting to attack the city. The top of the city wall was filled with siege ladders, and the ladders were full of people. The entire battlefield was a sea of people. In the vast sea of people, smoke filled the air, cannon fire roared, and arrows rained down. At every moment, hundreds and thousands of people died in battle. In this situation, the Dragon Stallion army defending the city began to show signs of fatigue, and the vast amount of resources they had for defending the city was being consumed at a visible rate. It was obvious that they wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Without the support of these resources, it was simply impossible to defend the city. Seeing that the middle army had been drawn into the fray, Bai Qi knew that the moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. He turned and ordered, "Fire the signal flare." Yes. The well-prepared guard immediately lit the signal flare in his hand. With a whoosh, a red signal flare soared into the air. "What's that?" Wang Meng and the others were confused. Little Mu Tuo replied, "It's a signal flare." Wang Meng naturally knew that it was a signal flare, but who was it being sent to? Suddenly, a sliver of unease rose in Wang Meng's heart. He turned and asked his guard, "Where are the Grand Xia's tiger-leopard cavalry?" Wang Meng suspected that the tiger-leopard cavalry had arrived. The guard replied, "Reporting to General, a scout came this morning to report that the tiger-leopard cavalry are still in Yao City. They will need at least a day to reach Eternal Benevolence City." "They're not the tiger-leopard cavalry?" Wang Meng grew even more uneasy. Little Mu Tuo comforted him, saying, "General, there's no need to be suspicious. There are no other troops in Dongchuan Commandery besides the Dragon Stallion army. Even the garrison divisions have been disbanded by the Grand Xia." Wang Meng forced a smile. "Perhaps I'm overthinking things." Even so, Wang Meng still ordered the 4 reserve troops to be on guard. Little Mu Tuo and the others only admired Wang Meng's attentiveness. How could they interfere? But Wang Meng's unease had still come true. Half an hour after the signal flare was launched, a deafening sound suddenly came from the northern outskirts of Eternal Benevolence City. "This is..." The expressions of Wang Meng and the others instantly changed. "It's from the north." Xiao Nianying had the sharpest senses, but unfortunately, he couldn't do anything. Northern outskirts of Eternal Benevolence City, in a mountain forest. The moment the signal flare was launched, the 4th Imperial Guard Corps, led by the valiant General Eli, charged out of the forest like a fierce tiger descending a mountain. Compared to the Dragon Stallion army, the Imperial Guard were the true gods of death. Every member of this corps was a veteran of 100 battles, a true elite who killed without batting an eye. And with an unrivaled general like Eli as their commander, they were simply a bunch of devils. Kill! The first thing Eli and the 4th Imperial Guard Corps encountered was the coalition army of the northern outskirts. The 10,000 reserve troops at the rear of the army had just received the order to be on guard, but before they could react, they were kicked in the buttocks by the Imperial Guard and scattered in all directions. For a moment, the Imperial Guard unleashed a torrential slaughter, their blood covering the clouds. They were routed. The moment the two armies clashed, it was clear who was superior. The Imperial Guard was like an invincible blade that chopped the reserve troops in half, and then, unabated, they charged into the coalition army that was currently besieging the city. The coalition army was thrown into chaos. Chapter 948. The defeat of the coalition forces in the northern suburbs was only the prelude to the defeat of the coalition forces. The fleeing coalition forces were like frightened birds, walking in panic, chased by death. They instinctively rushed to the wilderness on the east and west sides of Yongren City. The chaotic crowd immediately disrupted the formation of the coalition forces on the east and west side. A general grabbed a fleeing soldier and asked, "What happened in the north?" The soldiers on the east and west sides of the coalition forces still didn't know what happened, and they were all confused. The enemy, kill, kill!" The officer asked, "Where did the enemy come from? How many people are there? Did they kill their way out of the city or somewhere else?" The series of questions made the soldier confused, and he stammered, I don't know, the people at the back fled, we also fled." The officer shook his head and let the soldier go. In the chaotic battlefield, it was really impossible to rely on a soldier to find out accurate information. "A few people go and find out what the situation is," the officer ordered. "Yes, sir." Soon, a few light cavalry, going against the current, ran toward the north. But without waiting for the light cavalry to turn back, an even more ferocious crowd had already surged towards them. That formation was like an avalanche, and any troops that stood in front of them were smashed into pieces. The number of people who were trampled to death was uncountable. The whole battlefield was like purgatory, and there were panicked and helpless people everywhere. It turned out that Eli saw this good opportunity and decisively divided the army into two, chasing the east and west sides. Eli did not expect the coalition forces to be so good-looking, but useless and scattered as soon as they rushed in. This was not surprising. The coalition forces were composed of three major parts. Except for the Dali Imperial Guards, which were relatively pure, the rest could be called miscellaneous troops. The 50,000 territorial troops of Cloud City were temporarily put together after the annexation of the territory. The 100,000 mutant troops of the Shao Alliance were even more unruly. They had no experience in joint combat, and even no experience in large-scale combat. In fact, the mutant troops were the most straightforward to run. These players did not have a strong concept of military discipline, and at the critical moment, it was naturally important to save their lives. Although the guild had promised a generous death compensation, no one was willing to start all over again. The 100,000 mutant troops suddenly became the biggest unstable factor in the coalition forces. The roots of the three troops were different, and their nature was also different. How could such a united army not be defeated when their morale was greatly reduced, when they were suddenly ambushed by a trump-card army like the Imperial Guards when their siege of the city was blocked? Wang Meng said that this army was well trained, but he was probably blind. This kind of army could be seen in good times, but once they were in a bad situation, they would immediately reveal their true colors. In comparison, they could not even compare to the army of Swordsman City. The Imperial Guard Corps led by Eli was like a pack of wolves that were herding lambs. They galloped wantonly within the Allied forces, and they cooperated tacitly with each other as they set off a monstrous slaughter, causing death to pervade the army and further increase the fear of the Allied forces. Up until now, there were still about 150,000 of the 200,000 soldiers left in the Allied army, which was more than twice the number of the Imperial Guards. If he wanted to subdue this Allied army, he had to attack their hearts, completely disrupt their formation, strike fear in their hearts, and destroy their morale. As the saying goes, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. Wu Lai had been in the wilderness for more than 3 years. Under the influence of the Great Xia army and the deliberate grooming of Ouyang Shuo, Wu Lai was no longer just a valiant general. After 3 years of tempering, Wu Lai had gained some understanding of the art of war and could be said to have been reborn. As a result, Wu Lai's deployment was rather particular. The 4th Imperial Guard Corps was a mixed infantry and cavalry corps. The cavalry would open the way in front and tear the enemy apart, while the infantrymen would charge in and expand the battle results. The two types of soldiers were coordinated in an orderly manner, and they were commanded like two limbs. Logically speaking, this Imperial Guard Corps had just been formed by transferring soldiers from the 3 major armies. How could they have such an efficient and coordinated combat ability? This was all thanks to the restructuring of the Great Xia Army's training system by Chief Gao Shun. Regardless of whether it was the Imperial Guard Corps, the Dragon Stallion Army, the Brave Tiger Army, or the Hidden Leopard Army, they all used the same set of Great Xia's Field Army Daily Training Manual. As a result, this set of standards had long been integrated into the blood of the officers and soldiers. This was even more so for the battle-hardened elite soldiers. With this as a basis, coupled with an appropriate commander, how could they not be efficient? A spectacle appeared in the wilderness. The 70,000 Imperial Guards chased the 150,000 Allied forces all the way. It was truly amazing. In the barracks in the southern suburbs, Wang Meng's face darkened as he looked at the chaotic scene at the front line. If the historical Wang Meng could live for a few more years and persevere until the Battle of Fei River, he would probably have even more feelings. The route of the Allied forces in front of him was very similar to the route of the former Qin army. Soldiers were not soldiers, and generals were not generals. Soldiers could not find generals, and generals could not gather soldiers. The entire battlefield was a complete mess, and there was no longer any motivation to attack the city. After the Eastern and Western Allied forces were disrupted by the evil army, the completely panicked soldiers instinctively fled to the south. Under the chain effect, the entire Allied forces were in complete chaos. There was no longer any peace in all directions. A sudden rout was right in front of them. Retreat! Someone couldn't help but say. Unexpectedly, these words completely infuriated Wang Meng. He suddenly turned around and said fiercely, Who? Who said you want to retreat? Stand up. His eyes looked as if he wanted to devour someone. It's me. The person involved, Xiao Nianying, didn't have a trace of fear, nor did he feel guilty. He spoke very calmly. Since the Allied forces were doomed, Xiao Nianying didn't want the Xiao Alliance to be brought to hell by Wang Meng. Don't even think about it. Wang Meng was depressed. He suddenly realized that he couldn't do anything to Xiao Nianying. Before coming, Wang Meng had made a military order in front of the Lord that if he didn't take down Yongren City, he would capture Bai Qi alive and bring his head to see him. Therefore, for Wang Meng, there was no way out of this battle. Either Bai Qi was alive or he would be buried with him. Previously, Wang Meng led a team to the Great Sui dynasty and caused a huge disturbance, which had already made Wang Meng's situation in Handan City quite difficult. This time, he was entrusted with an important task by the Lord. How could Wang Meng fail again? Humph, if you don't retreat, we will retreat. Seeing that the rout was a foregone conclusion, Xiao Nianying didn't want to be buried with everyone. In just a short while, the 100,000 elites of the Xiao Alliance had already lost tens of thousands, which had reached the limit of what the alliance could bear. If this dragged on, the Xiao Alliance would be dragged down by this battle. Wang Meng said, How dare you? I am the commander of the Allied forces. Those who don't follow my orders, I can directly take you down. As he spoke, his personal guards had already surrounded Xiao Nianying. In Xiao Nianying's eyes, Wang Meng was after all just an NPC. The arrogance in his bones made Xiao Nianying feel that he was a notch above Wang Meng. How could he bear such humiliation? This completely angered Xiao Nianying, who originally cared about his face. His expression became extremely gloomy, like a son of a noble family who wanted to eat someone up. With a swoosh, he pulled out the long sword at his waist and said coldly, I have given you face. Wang Meng, you are just a dog in front of Di Chen. I only respectfully call you general because of Di Chen. Do you really think that you are someone important? Do you believe that I will kill you with my sword? You! Wang Meng was extremely embarrassed and angry. At this point, Wang Meng was speechless in front of the Lord. There was no other choice but to die. Take him down, Wang Meng said coldly. The entire camp was guarded by Wang Meng's personal guards. Once they received the order, they immediately went forward to take him down. Xiao Nianying coldly smiled. Wang Meng, you have to think carefully. I am a mutant, have an immortal body, and also have a strange treasure to protect my body. I can die without any harm. If you catch me today, I guarantee that you will die without a burial place." With the substitute doll by his side, Xiao Nianying had nothing to fear. Facing Xiao Nianying's death threat, Wang Meng was unmoved and coldly said, "I have already disregarded life and death. You cannot threaten me. Come, tie this person up, and bring him into the camp to await trial." Yes. The personal guards no longer hesitated, and all rushed forward. Xiao Nianying was somewhat flustered, hesitating whether to resist or not. As the saying goes, the tyrannical fear the stupid fear the reckless. Although Xiao Nianying was not afraid of death, he was not willing to lose a substitute doll in vain. That was a priceless treasure, and he spent 300,000 gold coins to buy it. "You wait." Xiao Nianying finally chose to temporarily admit defeat, leaving behind a ruthless sentence, really like the style of an aristocratic family. A wise man submits to circumstances. This was their mantra. Wang Meng no longer spoke. His eyes inadvertently glanced at the little Mu Tuo and the commander of the Dali Imperial Guards. Compared to Xiao Nianying, an aristocratic family's young master, Wang Meng, Fu Jian's #1 subordinate, was really an old fox with rich experience. Taking care of Xiao Nianying, this kind of inexperienced person, wasn't it a piece of cake? Wang Meng was so determined to take down Xiao Nianying. One was to prevent the Xiao Alliance's mutant troops from withdrawing in advance, and the other was to make an example to the others, to deter the little Mu Tuo and the commander of the Dali Imperial Guards. If these people's beliefs were shaken, and they all had the thought of withdrawing, then this battle would really be over. And in Wang Meng's view, the Allied forces were only in a momentary chaos, and still had the strength to fight. Sure enough, after Wang Meng's show of strength, the two forcibly endured and did not say anything. In this way, the internal strife temporarily subsided. But the situation on the battlefield still did not improve. Wang Meng calmed down and began to constantly adjust the troops. He first ordered the whole army to stop attacking the city, in order to concentrate on dealing with the current chaos, so that the Allied forces would not be attacked from the front and back. With the military order, the attacking troops, who did not know what happened, retreated in groups. In just a short while, the previously empty wilderness was once again densely packed with people. It could be seen that because of the urgency of attacking the city, more than half of the troops were sent to the front line, and were not affected. Even if they were withdrawn from the city, the whole formation was still intact. This gave Wang Meng confidence. Then Wang Meng ordered the Allied forces in the southern suburbs to form a formation, ready to resist the enemy's next wave of attack. At the same time, he sent people to appease the defeated soldiers, and gathered them together again. The 10,000 reserve soldiers in the southern suburbs were sent by Wang Meng to be the law enforcement team. Those who dared to spread rumors, and those who dared to retreat, were all executed on the spot. After a series of adjustments, the panicked Allied forces finally temporarily stabilized their position. But Wang Meng still underestimated Eli, underestimated Bai Qi, and even underestimated Great Xia. Chapter 949. On the walls of Yongren City. Bai Qi had seen Wang Meng's adjustments to the Allied army. How could such a trick trouble Bai Qi? He immediately issued the order, "Zhao Bonu. This general is here. Immediately gather a group of battle-ready soldiers and have them gather near the southern gate. Await further orders." Yes. Zhao Bonu left to carry out the order. The Dragon Stallion army had lost more than 6,000 men in the battle. Fortunately, the enemy had stopped attacking the city. Apart from leaving behind a group to guard the southern walls, the rest had been gathered by Zhao Bonu, totaling more than 30,000 men. Bai Qi then issued the order, "Sound the drums." Yes. Dong. Dong dong. This was the first time the drums had sounded on the walls of Yongren City, but not for the defending army. The rapid and forceful beating of the drums reached the ears of the Imperial Guards who were fighting outside the city. The Imperial Guards who were still fighting perked up when they heard the drums, especially Eli and the other division commanders, who were overjoyed and ordered their deputies, "Pay attention to the flags on the walls at all times." Yes. It turned out that Bai Qi had already told Eli that when the army was in a stalemate, Bai Qi would personally command the Imperial Guards outside the city with the flags from above. The Imperial Guards' line of sight would be obstructed by the chaotic battlefield, and even with their discipline, they could fall behind or make mistakes in their marching route. A single misstep could even result in an ambush by the allied army. With this move from Bai Qi, there would be no more problems. Bai Qi could see the entire battlefield from his vantage point, and with his superb command skills, he could nimbly instruct the army to attack and avoid according to the changes in the battlefield. To put it bluntly, Bai Qi was the eyes and brains of the Imperial Guard. With Bai Qi's command, the Imperial Guards outside the city only needed to follow orders and kill the enemy. This was exactly what the Imperial Guards were thinking. With the two working together, they could achieve twice the results with half the effort. Sure enough, under Bai Qi's command, the Imperial Guards easily bypassed the defensive formations that Wang Meng had painstakingly set up and killed their way into the Allied army's rear, throwing them into chaos once more. The defeated Allied army was already a flock of frightened birds. If the Allied army could block them and give them time to recover, they would still be able to put up a fight. But just as they took a breather, that group of murderous gods would arrive. How could they not be frightened? Rumors began to spread in the army. At the beginning, it was something like, the Great Xia army launched a sneak attack from the north with 100,000 soldiers. Slowly, it evolved into, the Great Xia army set up a trap with a total of 300,000 soldiers. However, the soldiers believed it without a doubt. Otherwise, how could the enemy have beaten them into such a sorry state? There's no more accurate news than this. The soldiers vowed as they fled. Only then would they be able to escape with a clear conscience. As for the 10,000 members of the law enforcement squad, they were unable to stabilize the situation amidst the surging army formation. In fact, they could not even protect themselves because the god of slaughter, Bai Qi, had already noticed them. The expressionless Bai Qi was like a brilliant surgeon. The Imperial Guards were the scalpel in Bai Qi's hand, accurately cutting and dissecting the Allied forces. Whichever unit they destroyed could dismember the enemy's defensive line. Whichever fortress they destroyed could tear open a gap in the enemy's defense line. Whichever position they attacked could cause the greatest damage to the Allied forces. Bai Qi was well aware of this, and his gaze was like lightning. In comparison, Wang Meng's command and response were very weak. Seeing that the Allied army was in a mess, Wang Meng had already lost control of the army. The Allied army's total defeat was inevitable. The first to retreat was still the Shao Alliance's mutant army. At first, these players fled out of instinct to save their lives, but now that they were fleeing, they almost collapsed because of the bloody battlefield. Imagine an adventurer player who only dealt with monsters and bandits in such a noisy, bloody, and chaotic battlefield. He was surrounded by people, and because it was too chaotic, he was separated from his teammates and surrounded by soldiers of the Alliance that he did not know. Thinking that the god of slaughter behind him could kill him at any time, how could he not be afraid? At this time, he did not care about the overall situation or victory. It was better to escape as soon as possible. After today's experience, this player was not willing to step into the battlefield again. It was more practical to play one-on-one games with monsters and bandits in peace. The mutant army's defeat became the catalyst for the Allied army's total defeat. A defeat that no one could stop was staged outside Yongren City. It was a spectacular scene. As far as the eye could see, the southern suburbs of Yongren City, the land that stretched for hundreds of miles, was filled with soldiers who had abandoned their helmets and armor, fleeing south without a care for their lives. rations, siege equipment, and even weapons and armor had all been abandoned on the battlefield. Thick smoke billowed from the small mountain where the Allied command center was located. This was the result of Wang Meng's order to burn down the tents along with the marching materials before he retreated. Fortunately, Wang Meng still had some conscience and had released Xiao Nianying when he retreated. Bai Qi knew that the outcome had been decided, but he was still not satisfied. He wanted to continue expanding his gains. Order Zhao Bonu to immediately leave the city and lead the troops in pursuit. Yes. After a while, the southern gate that the Allied army had failed to take opened from the inside. The 30,000 dragon stallion soldiers, who had been waiting for a long time, charged out like ferocious tigers, cooperating with the Imperial Guard to encircle and annihilate the Allied army. They had captured countless prisoners along the way. In the blink of an eye, it was night time, and they were no longer able to continue their march. Whether they were chasing or fleeing, they had one precious time to catch their breath, rest, and eat something to replenish their energy. The tragic Allied army suddenly discovered that their rations and supplies had long since been lost, and there was nothing left to eat. They had no choice but to catch some river water to fill their stomachs. It was destined that no one would be able to sleep that night. Wang Meng could be considered a responsible commander, and was not in a hurry to commit suicide to atone for his crimes. He knew that at times like this, as the commander-in-chief of the army, he had to shoulder even more responsibility. Taking advantage of the darkness, Wang Meng sent out groups of soldiers to gather the remnants of the army and form a combined force. Because Wang Meng knew that the Great Xia army would not let them off so easily. As soon as the sun rose, the pack of vicious wolves would catch up again. After calming down a little, the Allied soldiers couldn't understand why they had fled so crazily during the day. At that time, there was only one thought in their minds. Run, run as far as we can to the south. When they came to their senses, they were all ashamed. This was not like a regular army at all. After receiving the summon order from the commander-in-chief, the majority of the soldiers chose to join up with him. This was the best way to save their lives. After all, they were still within the borders of the Great Xia. Scattered soldiers would not be able to escape the pursuit of the Great Xia. Only by uniting together would they have a chance of survival. Once again, Wang Meng became the backbone of the Allied army. Even the players of the Shao Alliance did not leave alone. Without the protection of the army, they had no confidence in escaping back to Dali. The problem was that Eli, Zhao Bonu, and the other Great Xia generals would not let Wang Meng do as he wished. Just as Wang Meng sent out the liaison team, Eli and the others were not idle either. They sent out elite cavalry and launched surprise attacks that night. They constantly harassed the Allied army and made it impossible for them to have peace. Every time the Great Xia cavalry attacked, no matter how many there were, the frightened Allied army would only run away. They did not even think of resisting on the spot. That night, the remnants of the Allied forces, who had been fighting for an entire day, were tortured by the Great Xia cavalry. They didn't get a good night's sleep. Early in the morning, their eyes were bloodshot. And this was just the beginning of the nightmare. At daybreak, the Great Xia army chased after them and launched another massacre. The focus of the attack was the Allied army that Wang Meng had painstakingly gathered. Under the attack of Eli, it was once again torn apart and dispersed. Wang Meng's heart was full of despair when he saw this. The two armies launched a life-and-death chase in the wilderness of Dongchuan County. The remnants of the Allied army were constantly slaughtered or simply surrendered, and the number of prisoners of war increased exponentially. This went on for 2 days and 2 nights. On the morning of the third day, the remnants of the Allied army finally ran to the border and were about to enter the territory of Dali County. The number of Allied army that could make it this far was less than 60,000. Phew, I've finally escaped death. The officers and soldiers of the Allied army had a kind of joy of surviving a disaster, and their tense nerves finally relaxed. In the army formation, Wang Meng, Little Mu Tuo, Xiao Nianying and the others were impressively in line, firmly protected by personal guards. It was just that their faces no longer had the high spirits they had when they set off. Each and every one of them was extremely embarrassed. Xiao Nianying was even more disheartened. After a big battle, the 100,000 troops of the Xiao alliance were now less than 30,000. Just the death compensation alone was an astronomical figure. If they really wanted to compensate them one by one, the Xiao alliance could only go bankrupt. Not to mention that this battle had greatly damaged the overall strength of the Xiao alliance. They were afraid that they would not be able to maintain their position as the overlord of Dali Royal City. A great crisis had already enveloped Xiao Nianying, the Xiao family, and the Xiao alliance. It was absolutely difficult for Xiao Nianying to withstand this crisis. What had supported Xiao Nianying until now was that glimmer of hope. This expedition was all because of the Yan Huang alliance, and they would not ignore the Xiao alliance. The Xiao alliance was not a chess piece that could be abandoned by the Yan Huang alliance at any time. The Xiao family was a member of the Silver Hand, and could not be provoked. It was just that this battle was ultimately lost. When the army came to the border, the commander of the Dali Imperial Guards suddenly frowned and said to Wang Meng, "General, isn't this border a little too quiet?" Wang Meng was startled, then reacted and said, "It is indeed a little too quiet. There must be a reason for things to be abnormal." Along the way, Wang Meng always felt that there was an extremely important thing that he had forgotten. "Let the whole army be on guard," Wang Meng instinctively ordered. It was better to be safe than sorry. Seeing this, Little Mu Tuo said disapprovingly, "I say, General Wang, aren't you making a big fuss over a minor issue? Have you been frightened by the great Xia army?" As soon as his voice fell, the rumbling sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded in the woods on both sides of the border. When Wang Meng heard this, his face instantly turned pale. He finally remembered what was going on. "Damn it, how could I forget? The tiger leopard cavalry of the Great Xia has never appeared in Dongchuan County." Chapter 950. The 30,000 tiger leopard cavalry led by Ma Chao were lurking at the border of Dongchuan County. On the day that the Battle of Yongren City ended, Bai Qi sent an urgent message to Ma Chao through the courier station, telling him not to rush to Yongren City, but to go straight to the border and wait for his prey. That was why Ma Chao's troops were ambushed. The moment the tiger leopard cavalry charged out, Wang Meng lost all hope. He turned his head to the north and said sadly, "Your Highness, I have failed you and have no face to return. I can only atone for my sins with my death." With that, Wang Meng suddenly drew his sword and committed suicide before his personal guards could react. Bright red blood spurted out and dyed the blue sky red. A hero of the generation had fallen just like that. With a plop, Wang Meng's body fell off his horse. His eyes were wide open, showing his unwillingness to accept his fate. That was the regret of unfulfilled ambition and the unwillingness of being born at the wrong time. Perhaps there was even a tinge of bitterness that came from not being human. In front of the brilliant generals of Great Xia, all the famous generals felt inferior. This time, Wang Meng was completely defeated by Bai Qi. This was a huge blow to Wang Meng and also one of the reasons why he committed suicide. "General!" the personal guards exclaimed. No one expected Wang Meng to be so unyielding. The personal guards turned pale. According to the rules of the army, if the general died, the personal guards would be buried with him. Even if they managed to escape back to Handan City, they would not be able to escape death. The only way out was to surrender. However, personal guards were different from ordinary soldiers. If they surrendered, they would inevitably bear the bad reputation of betraying their master. Hearing the exclamations, Little Mu Tuo and the rest finally reacted. Their faces were pale and their hearts were filled with sorrow. The fox grieves for the rabbit's death. Thinking back to their high spirits when they set off and now they were in dire straits. The difference was like heaven and earth. All these drastic changes happened in just 2 to 3 days. The world had changed so much that people did not know what to do. Wang Meng's death was like a bolt from the blue to the already terrible Allied army. Seeing that the general had committed suicide, the soldiers no longer had the will to fight. Moreover, they were ambushed in front of them and pursued from behind. The fate of the remnants of the 60,000 Allied army could be imagined. Clang! Someone threw down the weapon in his hand. There's no more hope. Clank! Clank! Half of the remaining 60,000 soldiers surrendered in the blink of an eye, and the rest were mostly mutants. This was because the natives could surrender, but the Shao alliance couldn't. Even if he surrendered, the other party wouldn't want him. Seeing this, Shao Nianying unsheathed the long sword on his waist. With a solemn expression, he loudly said, "Brothers, the failure of this expedition is my responsibility. I will naturally shoulder the due responsibility when I return. But now, please believe me one more time, unite together, and follow me to break out of this encirclement." When the members of the Shao alliance heard that, they all had complicated expressions. Before the expedition, Shao Nianying used the experience of a flowing light pavilion as an example to convince the guild members to support this expedition. Most of the members agreed with Shao Nianying's judgment, otherwise they would not have willingly gone out to battle. However, the outcome of the expedition was unacceptable to the players. Wang Meng and the rest vowed that their plan was meticulous, but they were ambushed by Great Xia and suffered heavy casualties. Escaping all the way to the border, the members of the Shao alliance were already resentful towards Shao Nianying. But no matter how much they hated each other, as Shao Nianying said, this was an internal conflict of the guild. Naturally, it should be left to be resolved after returning. What they needed to do now was to unite together and break out of this encirclement. Otherwise, it was unknown how many more brothers would die. Therefore, although Shao Nianying's mobilization order was ordinary, it aroused the passion of the members of the Shao alliance. Kill! 30,000 members of the Shao alliance gathered together and charged towards the tiger leopard cavalry. Meeting on a narrow path, the brave wins. When Ma Chao saw this, he sneered. Overestimating yourself. As he spoke, he took the lead and led the troops to fight with the Shao alliance. The two armies were like two torrents, rushing towards each other and colliding in the wilderness. Blood splattered everywhere. 30,000 against 30,000 seemed to be evenly matched, but in such a large-scale battle, it was an infantry against the elite cavalry of Great Xia. It was impossible for the Shao alliance to win. Countless players didn't even have time to display their skills before they were trampled into meat paste by the war horses. In less than an hour, the outcome of the battle was decided. Apart from a few members of the Shao alliance, who fought their way out and escaped back to Dali in a sorry state, the rest lost their lives. At this point, the Battle of Dongchuan County had basically come to an end. All that was left was to clean up the mess. As soon as the battle ended, Eli and Zhao Bonu, who were in charge of the pursuit, rushed over. The three armies of Great Xia met victoriously at the border and settled the overall situation. After letting the assistant generals deal with the aftermath, the three generals gathered together. Zhao Bonu took out 2 military orders and said solemnly, "Commander's orders." Ma Chao and Eli bowed and said, "Receive the orders." Zhao Bonu first looked at Eli and said, "General Wu will lead the 4th Imperial Guard Corps to detain the prisoners of war, clear Dongchuan County, and guard Lingxi City." "Yes, Commander." Eli cupped his fists and received the military order. After the Battle of Yongren City, the Allied army had scattered in all directions. Apart from the prisoners of war, there were still many stragglers in Dongchuan County that needed to be regrouped and reorganized. In this battle, among the 200,000 Dali Allied army, apart from the 10,000 mutants who had escaped, the rest were either killed or captured. Currently, the Allied army had around 60,000 prisoners of war, and the final number of prisoners of war would only be calculated after Dongchuan County was completely cleared. This task would take a long time, and it was just the right time for the 4th Imperial Guard Corps to attack Lingxi City and intimidate the people around. This way, Eli could lead his troops to clear the area while cooperating with the Privy Council to reorganize the troop. Zhao Bonu then looked at Ma Chao and said, "General Fenway will lead his troops into Dali County and take down Cloud City. Taking down Cloud City would eliminate a hidden danger." "Yes, Commander." Cloud City was now left with only 2 or 3 people, and taking down Cloud City would be a piece of cake. However, the Dali Imperial Court had no reason to intervene. The loss of 50,000 Imperial Guards was also a heavy blow to that person in the Dali Imperial Palace, and he would no longer be able to easily influence the decision of the Dali Imperial Court. There was a limit to the authority given by Gaia. Zhao Bonu took out a secret letter and passed it to Ma Chao, saying, "This is a password that His Majesty has entrusted to the commander." Ma Chao listened and solemnly accepted it. Of course, Ouyang Shua could directly give the order to Ma Chao, but where would Bai Qi be placed? Therefore, even if Ouyang Shua was Emperor Xia, many things had to be done according to the rules. Ma Chao opened the secret letter, and his expression became clear. Ouyang Shua ordered Ma Chao that after taking down Cloud City, there was no need to choose to occupy it, but to directly choose to destroy it. In that case, the cities that were painstakingly built in Dali County would be reduced to nothing in an instant. The entire Dali County would return to a state of wilderness. Therefore, before shattering the territory's stone tablet, Ma Chao had to lead his troops and cooperate with the Yunnan Province Governor's office to move all the citizens of Cloud City to the Xia Kingdom. Those who dared to disobey would be killed without mercy. Ouyang Shua was going to use the 3 lights policy on Cloud City. Naturally, there was a reason for doing so. If Ouyang Shua did not remember wrongly, according to the memories of his previous life, Gaia's 5-year system update targeted a county where Imperial City was located. After the update, unless a player's territory in the county chose to rely on Imperial City for protection, they would be automatically regarded as Imperial City's enemy. Imperial City could then send troops to encircle and annihilate them. To put it bluntly, Gaia wanted to clearly designate the county where Imperial City was located as Imperial City's private land. It was the same whether Imperial City had an emperor or not. Therefore, there was no meaning in occupying Cloud City now. It was better to empty it and leave nothing for the Dali Imperial Court. Apart from the population, all the resources had to be moved away. All in all, it would be enough to cover the expenses of this war. The future Dali Imperial Court would be even more isolated and helpless than the Great Sui. After announcing the military order, Zhao Bonu also had to lead his troops back to Yongren City. With the Dongchuan County matter settled, and the 4th Imperial Guard Corps holding the fort in Lingxi City, Bai Qi could finally head north with peace of mind. He entered Sichuan and joined up with the main force of the Dragon Stallion Army to command the decisive battle between the Xia Kingdom and Swordsman City. In the end, the battle with the Dali Allied Army was just an appetizer. The real battle was still in Sichuan, in Swordsman City. He just didn't know how the battle in Dongchuan County would affect the situation in the China region. Handan City, the city lord's residence. The moment Wang Meng committed suicide, Di Chen received a notification from the system. How could this be? Di Chen's face was pale and ugly. Peerless Elegance's heart trembled. She rarely saw Di Chen lose his composure like this. Concerned, she asked, "What happened?" Di Chen said bitterly, "Wang Meng committed suicide." "What?" Peerless Elegance was also in disbelief. She glanced at Di Chen sympathetically. Fate is so unfair to this man. 2 days ago, they learned that the Dali Allied Army had been ambushed by the Xia Kingdom outside Yongren City and had fled in defeat. At that time, Di Chen was in a very bad mood and was rather depressed. Fortunately, it was only a failure of the plan, and there was no substantial impact on Handan City. But Wang Meng's sudden suicide was undoubtedly a heavy blow to Di Chen. It was not easy for Handan City to have another famous general after Lien Po. Who would have thought that he would disappear like a shooting star? Losing Wang Meng was undoubtedly breaking an arm of the Handan City army. Seeing that Di Chen had not recovered from his shock, Peerless Elegance comforted him. Wang Meng has always been an unyielding man. He was already feeling guilty about the failure of the previous mission to the Sui Kingdom. This time, after the defeat in Dongchuan County, he must have lost all hope. Even if he returns to his territory, it will be difficult for him to lead the army again. Victory and defeat are common in military affairs. Why did it have to be like this? Di Chen couldn't help but sigh. There was a trace of regret in his heart. He didn't regret planning the Dali allied army's attack on the Xia Kingdom, but he regretted sending Wang Meng to lead the army. If I had known this would happen, I would have sent General Lien Po. Peerless Elegance shook her head. This time we were too careless. We didn't expect the Xia Kingdom to use disarmament as a cover and secretly assemble their army. If we had sent General Lien Po this time, our losses would have been even greater. Lien Po was the symbolic general of Handan City and the core of the Handan army. If he died or was captured in this battle, it would be really terrible. Di Chen was depressed and said fiercely, I must avenge this. Chapter 951. Seeing that Di Chen couldn't get over it, Peerless Elegance changed the topic. What are you going to do about Swordsman City? Following the defeat of the greatly allied forces, Yan Huang Alliance's plan to trap the great Xia Longxiang army in Shu officially failed. The situation in Swordsman City became tense. At this time, Di Chen had to make a clear stance, otherwise Feng Qingyang would curse again. What do you think? Di Chen didn't answer directly. In my opinion, we still need to support them. Reason? From the ambush outside Yongren City, Great Xia's purpose in provoking this war may not only be Swordsman City. I'm afraid they have other intentions. Speaking of this, Peerless Elegance suddenly said, I heard that the old fox plans to conduct a second ocean voyage in October. Di Chen's eyes narrowed. You mean to say that this war is actually a trap set by the old fox to clear the obstacles for the ocean voyage? Most likely so. Great Xia has not been established for long, and there are still many hidden dangers around. With the old fox's cautiousness, I'm afraid he won't be able to set sail with peace of mind if he doesn't eliminate these hidden dangers, Peerless Elegance analyzed. In terms of understanding of Ouyang Shua, Peerless Elegance was even better than Di Chen. Di Chen's eyes twitched. The territories of the four clans in Dali Prefecture were originally a hidden danger for Great Xia. Unexpectedly, their brilliant plan fell into the old fox's trap and allowed Great Xia to clear Dali Prefecture. Since you concluded that Great Xia has other intentions, then we should not move. Why do we need to support Swordsman City? Di Chen didn't understand. Great Xia's other goals are uncertain, but Swordsman City is something that Great Xia must eradicate. If we don't reinforce Swordsman City and allow Great Xia to take it down easily, Great Xia will be able to handle the situation with ease and can easily realize their other strategic intentions. Therefore, we must attack Great Xia in Swordsman City, Peerless Elegance said resolutely. What a terrifying woman. She had accurately guessed Ouyang Shua's thoughts. I understand. Di Chen nodded, agreeing with Peerless Elegance's judgment. In the next few days, the war that affected the entire wilderness suddenly entered the fast lane. Shocking news quickly spread through all the major media outlets. First, the Great Xia's defeat at Yongren City shocked the outside world. The China players were once again impressed by Great Xia's strategy. The longest road in the world is Great Xia's strategy. Someone lamented. Following which, there was news that Great Xia decisively attacked Dali Prefecture and destroyed Yunqing in one fell swoop, turning Dali into a barren land once again. The cruelty of his methods caused the surrounding territories of Great Xia to tremble in fear. No one could figure out why Great Xia was so resolute. This time, Great Xia had completely shed all pretense of cordiality with the Great Li Imperial Court, which made the Great Li Imperial Court in a difficult situation. There was even news that Great Xia had issued a recruitment notice in Dali, brazenly trying to poach players from the Supreme Court. The recruitment targets were not only limited to NPCs, but also players living in Dali. Anyone with foresight could foresee that the future of the Great Li Imperial Court would be worse than the current Great Sway. Therefore, if there was a chance, it would be better to escape from the abyss of misery as soon as possible. In a short period of time, countless people applied to immigrate to Great Xia. Some people said that Great Xia was taking drastic measures to break the foundation of the Dali Imperial Court. Unfortunately, the Imperial Court of Dali could do nothing about it. The temporary Imperial Court could not force the people in the city to stay or leave when there was no emperor. Before the war was over, Great Xia had dug out its first pot of gold. In addition to the 500,000 people in Cloud City, Great Xia could poach at least 1 million people from Dali Royal City. This was the greatest wealth for Great Xia. After Cloud City was destroyed by Great Xia, there was news that Great Xia's Dragon Stallion Army commander, Bai Qi, had finally led his troops into Shu, opening the prelude to the decisive battle between Great Xia and Swordsman City. At the same time, Di Chun and the others publicly declared that they would never allow Great Xia to attack Swordsman City. It could be said to be tit for tat. For a moment, the focus of the wilderness shifted from Yongren City to Swordsman City. Everyone was looking forward to the arrival of an unprecedented war. At this moment, two seemingly inconspicuous events happened in the wilderness, but they really affected the situation in the wilderness. One happened in Dali, and the other in Rosy Cloud City. On the 11th of October, Xiao Nianying led his troops back to satellite city of Dali. As soon as they entered the city, Xiao Nianying was keenly aware that the players in the city looked at them with playful eyes. Some were ridiculing, some were gloating, and some were looking forward to watching a good show. This made Xiao Nianying, who was very proud, very embarrassed, and a trace of unease arose in his heart. What's going on? Thinking of this, Xiao Nianying unconsciously quickened his pace and walked towards the city lord residence. What Xiao Nianying did not know was that back when the Dali allied army was defeated in Yongren City, a huge storm had already swept towards the Xiao alliance, the Xiao family, and Xiao Nianying. The moment Xiao Nianying returned, the storm was about to sweep up. When the allied forces were defeated in Yongren City, the reincarnation hall in satellite city of Dali emitted bursts of dim light. Members of the Xiao Alliance were reincarnating there one after another, and the reincarnation hall was soon filled to the brim. Logically speaking, in the latter half of Gaia's 4th year, players were increasingly cherishing their lives, and the chances of reincarnation were greatly reduced. As a result, the reincarnation hall became deserted, and there was rarely such a lively scene. The Dali players naturally understood what had happened after asking around. The news that the Dali allied army was attacked in Yongren City and the entire army was defeated gradually spread in the city. With this, the Dali players were in an uproar. As the overlord of Dali, the Xiao Alliance's every move affected the nerves of the Dali players. In the following days, there was an endless stream of Xiao Alliance players reincarnating. The Dali players were even more alarmed at the decisive battle at the border on the 9th of October. On that day alone, more than 20,000 Xiao Alliance members reincarnated in the reincarnation hall, setting an all-time record. Some people even calculated that less than a tenth of the 100,000 Xiao Alliance troops that were sent out for the expedition had survived. Even if Xiao Alliance was a super guild, it was just a dark horse that suddenly rose up during the Guardian Guild qualification battle. Its foundation couldn't be compared to Snow Rose and other veteran guilds. Including the branch members, The Shao Alliance had close to 600,000 players. About half of them had merged with other small and medium-sized guilds after the Guardian Guild qualification contest ended. Of the 600,000 members, combat professional players made up 2/3, which was about 400,000. These players were organized into 100-man teams, 1,000-man teams, and elite teams. The 100,000 elites that were sent out for the expedition had a combat strength equivalent to half of the entire Shao Alliance. Now, there were only 10,000 elites left out of the 100,000. It was equivalent to having the Shao Alliance's overall combat strength. The position of Dali's Overlord Guild was immediately in jeopardy. It was inevitable that the other animals in the forest coveted the tiger in its weakened state. In Dali City, there were no less than 5 large guilds with more than 200,000 members. There were even 2 guilds with more than 300,000 members. They were not far from the Shao Alliance. The Shao Alliance had lost nearly 100,000 elite. It was inevitable that these guilds would have other thoughts. The qualification to guard a satellite city was coveted. Just yesterday, 2 large guilds in Dali had announced a merger. The newly formed guild was called the Purple Moon Alliance. The Alliance Master was Purple Emperor, while the Deputy Alliance Master was Moon Empress. It had a total of 500,000 members, comparable to the Shao Alliance. Of course, this was only the strength on paper. If they were to really compare, the Purple Moon Alliance was still slightly inferior to the Shao Alliance. It lacked in heritage. However, the Shao Alliance had lost nearly 100,000 elite members. Its strength was incomparable to the Purple Moon Alliance. The overlord of Dali City's guild circle was about to change hands. All that was lacking was an opportunity. According to Gaia's setting for the Guardian Guild qualification, the Guardian Guild had to accept a challenge from other guilds at the beginning of every year. If they defended, they would continue to have the qualification. If they failed, they would naturally have to change hands. It was already October. In another 2 months, it would be Gaia's 5th year. Without a doubt, the Purple Moon Alliance's reorganization was aimed at the position of supremacy in Dali City. When that time came, would the Shao Alliance, which had suffered heavy casualties, still be a match for the Purple Moon Alliance? The Dali players seemed to have a premonition that a new overlord was about to be born. This was also why the Dali players had a teasing look in their eyes when they saw Shao Nianying and company. Many of those players were members of the Purple Moon Alliance. These members were becoming more and more arrogant in Dali's satellite city. It was as though they considered themselves the new masters. Shao Nianying and company returned to the City Lord Manor, the new headquarters of the Shao Alliance. The atmosphere at the headquarters was equally heavy, so heavy that it was suffocating. The uneasiness in Shao Nianying's heart intensified. Just as he sat down, before he could rest, he was stopped by his confidant. "Young master, the family head invites you over." In name, Shao Nianying was the leader of the Shao Alliance, the person in charge of the Shao Alliance. But in fact, the leader of the Shao Alliance was the entire Shao family. Shao Nianying was just the spokesperson that the family pushed to the forefront. The Shao family's family head was the true person in charge of the Shao Alliance. City Lord Manor, Main Hall. "Father!" Shao Nianying saluted the family head, that is, his father Shao Yuni. His heart was quite perturbed. Father Shao looked at his son with a complicated expression. Seeing that the armor on his body was tattered and he looked tired, it was obvious that he had suffered a lot in this expedition. He could no longer reprimand him. In the end, this expedition was the family's decision, and Shao Nianying was just an executor. The commander of the whole war was Wang Meng, and he had nothing to do with Shao Nianying. This big defeat really couldn't be blamed on Shao Nianying. But other people don't think so. Shao Yuni sighed in his heart. Although Shao Nianying cared about his face, he was also a sharp person. He said, "Father, did something happen?" Shao Yuni nodded and briefly explained the matter of the Purple Moon Alliance. "This group of damn guys." Xiao Nianying's expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect that as soon as the Xiao alliance showed its fatigue, a challenger would appear. This is not the worst. Xiao Yunyi's expression was also not relaxed. After a pause, he said with difficulty, "Strongholds are always broken from the inside. There's a traitor in the guild." Chapter 952. Who betrayed us? Xiao Nianying asked. Father Xiao waved his hand and said, "Let's go to the meeting hall. Everyone is waiting. You have to be mentally prepared." Without waiting for Xiao Nianying to ask, he got up and left. The father and son arrived at the meeting hall. The core members of the Xiao alliance were all present. Xiao Nianying frowned and secretly said, "Are they trying to force us to abdicate?" Just as they sat down, someone started to make things difficult. Alliance leader, 90,000 brothers lost their lives in this expedition. According to the compensation of 500 gold coins per person, the guild needs to come up with 45 million gold coins in a lump sum. Alliance leader, please make a decision. The person who spoke was the deputy alliance leader of the Xiao alliance, Luo Wuchen. He represented the interests of the small and medium-sized guilds that were merged into the Xiao alliance after the guild qualification battle. 45 million gold coins was an astronomical figure. Even the rich Great Xia could not come up with such funds. However, the death compensation was signed in an agreement and could not be denied. On the way back, Xiao Nianying had been thinking about how to solve this problem, but he still had no clue. Faced with Luo Wuchen's questioning, Xiao Nianying was speechless. He said, "Take out the 5 million gold coins from the warehouse first. We can think of a way with the remaining funds." Luo Wuchen asked, 5 million is only a fraction. It's less than 60 gold coins per person. I'm afraid the brothers who died in battle will not agree. Besides, if the funds are taken away, how can the guild operate? Then what do you think we should do? Xiao Nianying's face was gloomy. He already knew that Luo Wuchen did not come with good intentions. Luo Wuchen said, "This matter is because alliance leader agreed to Di Chen and the rest's request. Now that the guild is in trouble, we should naturally seek compensation from Di Chen and the rest." That's right. Luo Wuchen's words were unanimously supported by the other members. Back when Xiao Nianying wanted to wade into these muddy waters, there were people in the Xiao alliance who opposed it. Luo Wuchen was the most resolute one, but he was helpless. After the previous guild crisis, the Xiao alliance also underwent a shareholding reform. Xiao Nianying and the other Xiao family members held a total of 30% of the Xiao alliance as shares. Including the Xiao family's allies, the total shares exceeded 50%, so they had absolute say in the guild. Now these allies were also beginning to be dissatisfied. If they could not come up with the compensation, the Xiao alliance would only have bankruptcy. When the time came, Ogaya would auction off the Xiao alliance's assets to pay the compensation. If they couldn't pay it off, the players who died could only blame their bad luck. Xiao Nianying was forced into a corner and could only say, "Then I'll communicate with Yan Huang alliance first." In this way, this forced abdication came to an end. However, Xiao Nianying was not relaxed at all. He was extremely clear that if he was unable to come up with a solution, it would be difficult for the Xiao family to gain a foothold in the guild. The next day, Di Chen and the others replied that they were willing to pay 1 million gold coins as compensation. When Luo Wuchen and the others heard this, they sneered and said, "Are you trying to get rid of beggars?" A day passed, and the Xiao family was not indifferent. They thought of a few ways to remedy the situation, and Xiao Nianying told them. The first option was to sell off the guild's inventory. Besides the 5 million in cash, the Xiao alliance had obtained many precious materials and equipment in the underworld due to their guild guardian status. If he sold it, he could earn at least 7 million gold coins. Secondly, lower the compensation standard appropriately. In this expedition, the performance of the 100,000 elites was really disappointing. There was not a trace of bravery, and they were the fastest to escape from the battlefield. They were not even as good as the Cloud City Territory's army. With this kind of performance, even if they died, they were not worthy of the high compensation of 500 gold coins. Xiao Nianying's idea was to lower the compensation standard to 300 gold coins per person, saving 18 million gold coins in one go. The third option was to bring in a large guild. With the Xiao Alliance's status as the Guardian Guild, there was no need to worry that no large guilds would be willing to join the Xiao Alliance. To join, they would naturally have to pay a joining fee, which would be at least 5 million gold coins. This way, the Xiao Alliance's strength could be strengthened, and they could deal with the Purple Moon Alliance's provocations. The fourth option was to collect donations internally. This was the Xiao Alliance's moment of life and death, and the guild members should save themselves to avoid the fate of bankruptcy. It was recommended that every member donate at least 10 gold coins, with no upper limit. With the Xiao Alliance's 500,000 members, even if the 90,000 dead players were deducted, they would at least be able to raise 5 million gold coins. In this way, there would only be a gap of 4 million gold coins left. After listening to Xiao Nianying's solution, Luo Wuchen's eyes narrowed, and he said, "The Alliance Master's method is indeed good, but I have 2 questions, and I hope the Alliance Master can answer them." "Speak." First, according to the Alliance Master's plan, after this torment, not only will the guild's funds be depleted, even the guild's resources will be depleted, and the entire guild warehouse will be left with an empty shell. When that time comes, what will be used to equip the 90,000 brothers who died in battle? The Alliance Master won't say that this is also their own fault, right? This, Luo Wuchen continued. Second, this expedition was the result of the Alliance Master's forceful promotion. Now that something has happened, and all the members have to bear the burden, do you think everyone will agree? Not to mention the forced donation, the guild's funds, warehouse, and resources were all public property, and if they were emptied, it would naturally harm the interests of all the members. Bringing in a new guild would also dilute the shares of the members, so it was also a kind of interest violation. The Alliance Master has just returned, I'm afraid you don't know, with the establishment of the Purple Moon Alliance. Rumors have spread everywhere in the city, and the hearts of the people in the guild are not stable. Now that we are taking drastic measures, a big mess is in front of us, Luo Wuchen added. Hearing this, Xiao Nianying's face was extremely ugly. The players were not fools, seeing that the guild might not even be able to protect the rights to guard the guild. Why would they bear the burden together? And there were already people muttering that they wanted to disband. Xiao Nianying said, "Since you don't think my plan is good, I want to hear your opinion." Luo Wuchen was expressionless and said, "As the saying goes, every debt has a debtor, and every person has to bear the responsibility. The Alliance Master can't escape the blame for the mess that the guild has made today. If we want to stabilize the hearts of the people in the guild, someone has to bear the responsibility, and not the ordinary members." Saying this, Luo Wuchen stood up, bowed to Xiao Nianying, and said, "I hope the Alliance Master will take the blame and resign, and lead the Xiao family members out of the Xiao Alliance." Seeing this, the others stood up, bowed together, and said, "We hope the Alliance Master will take the blame and resign." This was the real way of forcing an abdication. "You, all of you." Xiao Nianying's face was pale. Pointing at the people in the hall, he was extremely angry. At this moment, a group of players appeared outside the yard, and said in unison, "We hope the Alliance Master will take the blame and resign." The voice was like an avalanche, drowning Xiao Nianying. Clearly, this was not a spur-of-the-moment idea, but had been planned for a long time. The guild members had been dissatisfied with the Xiao family for a long time. Xiao Nianying's body trembled, and he tried his best to stabilize his body, and said coldly, "What if I don't agree?" Luo Wuchen said, "Then we can only hold a shareholders' meeting, and dismiss the Alliance Master." At the same time, we have to apply to Gaia for arbitration, and let the Shao family compensate us. I believe that God Gaia will definitely give us justice. When Shao Nianying heard this, he looked at the Shao family's allies, and seeing that they were all ignoring him, he felt a chill in his heart. He knew that the matter could not be continued, and if it continued, it would not be beneficial to him or the family. Forget it, I admit defeat. Shao Nianying's expression was bleak. Perhaps the moment he agreed to Di Chen's request, he was destined to suffer a tragic fate today. The Shao family should return to seclusion, and be a reclusive family in peace. After all, this wilderness was not their stage. Soon, the Shao family was cleanly evicted by Shao Alliance, and even their shares were taken back to compensate for their losses. Luo Wuchen was not surprised, and was elected as the new alliance master. With the Shao family gone, the problem of Shao Alliance was still unsolved. If the compensation problem could not be solved, Luo Wuchen's position as the alliance master would not be stable. On the first day of his appointment, Luo Wuchen threw out a sensational news. Facing the expectations of the guild members, Luo Wuchen smiled and said, "I have good news for everyone. Emperor Xia is willing to take over the shares left behind by the Shao family and help the guild to tide through this crisis." Emperor Xia, isn't he the enemy of our Shao alliance? Luo Wuchen shook his head and said, "The one who has a grudge with the Xia kingdom is the Shao family, the Yan Huang alliance behind the Shao family, and not us. Now that the Shao family is gone, why would Emperor Xia care about us?" Everyone heard this and looked at each other. The smarter ones felt a chill in their hearts, and the way they looked at Luo Wuchen was different. They faintly felt that, from the beginning to the end, the drama within Shao Alliance seemed to have the shadow of the Xia kingdom. What was the relationship between the new alliance master and the Xia kingdom? They did not dare to think about it. Luo Wuchen saw this and continued, "Previously, why did Shao Nianying urge us to attack the Xia kingdom? Wasn't it because he was worried that the Xia kingdom would make things difficult for us in the future? Once the Xia kingdom takes over, all the hidden dangers will disappear." Everyone nodded, and this was true. Even if we agree with Emperor Xia's participation in the guild, how are we going to solve the current problem? Can Emperor Xia come up with the funds in one go? Currently, Shao Alliance was at its weakest. With the departure of the Shao family, the power gap left behind was naturally very coveted, and internal strife was inevitable. Therefore, there were people who did not want to see Ouyang Shua intervene in the matters of Shao Alliance. Luo Wuchen saw this, and secretly noted this person's name. He smiled and said, "What kind of person is Emperor Xia? Since he said that he is willing to take over, he naturally has a way to solve the current predicament." Of course, Emperor Xia is not a philanthropist, and it is impossible for him to come up with a huge amount of funds just for 30 shares. Fortunately, Emperor Xia said in advance that he is willing to return all the equipment dropped by the 90,000 fallen brothers. When the Xia kingdom's army cleaned up the battlefield, these equipment were basically kept. Those who died in the battle were all elite players, and naturally, their equipment was also of high quality. Each set was no less than 100 or 200 gold coins, and some even more. Therefore, this batch of equipment alone was worth tens of millions of gold coins. When everyone heard this, they could not help but gasp. They were shocked by the generosity of the Xia kingdom. Chapter 953. According to the guild's promise, in addition to receiving 500 gold coins as compensation, the players who died could also receive a set of equipment. However, the equipment was only ordinary equipment and could not be compared to what they dropped. In Gaia Year 4, the equipment of adventurer players were mostly tailored according to their skills, attributes, and combat habit. This equipment could be sold to others for 100 or 200 gold coins, but to them it was worth 1,000 gold coins. Therefore, if they could get back the equipment, reducing the death compensation was no longer unacceptable. After everyone had digested this, Luo Wuchen continued, "There's another piece of good news. If we agree to let Great Xia enter the guild, Great Xia can help us solve the problem of the Purple Moon Alliance." "How?" "Great Xia is willing to sell the rights to guard the Somali satellite cities to the Purple Moon Alliance. This way, the Purple Moon Alliance will move to Somalia and no longer pose a threat to us." Phew! Hearing this, everyone finally let out a long sigh of relief. In the end, the Purple Moon Alliance was the mountain that was pressing down on them. With these two conditions, there was no longer any meaning to them. "I agree to let Great Xia enter the guild." "Agreed." Luo Wuchen smiled and nodded. After discussion and the agreement of all the members, the Shao Alliance finally decided on a package of compensation plans. First, the Shao Alliance was renamed to the Fallen Leaf Alliance. Second, the death compensation for 90,000 players was reduced from 500 gold coins to 200 gold coins. As compensation, they would unconditionally receive the equipment that was dropped. Third, Great Xia would exchange the dropped equipment for 30% of the Shao Alliance's shares. Fourth, they would introduce a large guild, Quicksand, and obtain a joining fee of 5 million gold coins. Quicksand was not the guild that Shao Nianying had previously proposed, but a guild that Luo Wuchen had introduced. Outsiders did not know that Quicksand was already under the control of Great Xia. With these two conditions, it basically announced that Great Xia had absolute control over the Fallen Leaf Alliance. By controlling the Fallen Leaf Alliance and luring the Purple Moon Alliance away, it basically announced that the Dali Guild Circle was officially under the control of Great Xia, once again cutting off an important arm of Dali. At the same time, in the competition with the Yan Huang Alliance, Great Xia had once again taken down a city. The strength of both guilds gradually reversed in favor of Great Xia. The advantage that the Yan Huang Alliance had built with the help of the Silver Hand had basically been lost. Fifth, collect 10 gold from each member and convert them into guild point. This way, they would be able to collect 7 million gold without harming the interests of ordinary players. Sixth, sell a batch of rare materials to a thread, for 3 million gold coins. As the largest pure profession guild in the world, Thread of Life relied on the rich production of the underworld to prosper. Their wealth was comparable to that of a nation, and their desire for rare materials was limitless. To be able to receive so many rare materials in one go, the love thread link would wake up smiling even in his dreams. If a thread were to process these materials into equipment, they would be able to earn at least 2 million gold in profit. This was because in the later stages of the game, there would be more Master and Grandmaster professional players, and the profits that could be generated would naturally be higher. The quiet rise of a thread allowed the status of life profession players in the game to rise as well. At this point, everyone had clearly realized the immense value of lifestyle players. If not for the protection of the Great Xia Kingdom, a thread would have been torn to pieces. Hence, after receiving the news, Love Thread Link expressed that she was willing to give Ouyang Shua 300,000 gold coins as a commission. Ouyang Shua smiled and refused. He was not greedy for such a small amount of money. Love Thread Link looked charmingly at Ouyang Shua and said, "I know you don't lack money and don't care about this commission. How about this? I'll prepare some toys for Song Jia and Bing." Ouyang Shua didn't refuse again. With Love Thread Link's wealth today, the toys that she was talking about were probably worth a lot, perhaps even more than 300,000 gold coins. Ouyang Shua accepted them calmly, acknowledging their personal friendship. Love Thread Link saw this and smiled even more charmingly. After completing this material transaction, a Fallen Leaf Alliance would pay the compensation of 18 million gold coins. There would still be a batch of equipment and materials left in the guild warehouse, so it wouldn't be emptied at once. Of the 5 million in liquid funds, there would still be 2 million gold coins left. For the members of a Fallen Leaf Alliance, this was the best solution. Not only did it not shake the foundation of the guild, but it also preserved the position of the overlord of Dali Kingdom. More importantly, with the backing of Great Xia, they didn't have to worry about Great Xia finding trouble in the future. When everything was settled, the members of a Fallen Leaf Alliance were delighted to find that the strength of the guild didn't decrease, but increased. It actually ushered in a new era which was really surprising. The only desolate ones were the Shao family and Yan Huang Alliance, which was standing behind the Shao family. When the news came out, the world was in an uproar. Some people joked that Great Xia had almost used a method to gain control of a super guild. Although this method was coveted, only Great Xia had the conditions to use it. What can we do? Those who were jealous could only be envious and jealous. On the night that the plan was announced, Luo Wuchen sent a secret letter to the commander of the Mountain Sea Guards in Dali. There were only 4 words in the secret letter: mission completed. Just when Dali Kingdom was in an uproar, the Xiangnan province was also not calm. The flames of war suddenly ignited because south of Rosy Clouds, who had endured for a long time, finally made a move. The Xiangnan province was located in the central part of China. During the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, it belonged to Chu, and during the Three Kingdoms period, it belonged to Wu. The Xiangjiang River ran through the north and south, and the territory was rich in mineral resources. It was known as the Land of Nonmetallic Minerals and Land of Nonmetallic Minerals. In addition to the Han people, there were also ethnic minorities such as Tuzhong and Tujia. On the periphery of the Xiangnan province, the Mufu and Wugong Mountains bordered the Jiangchuan province in the east. On the west was the Yungue Plateau, on the northwest was the Wuling Mountains, on the south was the Chuanan province and the Lingnan province, on the north was the Binhu Plain and the Jingchu province. The entire province was divided into 5 counties. From south to north, they were Guiyang County, Yongzhou County, Baoqing County, Changsha County, and Changde County. Rosy Cloud City occupied the southernmost Guiyang County and Yongzhou County. The main city, Rosy Cloud City, was located in the north of Yongzhou County. When the Child Protection Department was attacked, south of Rosy Cloud City began to mobilize its army. The strange thing was that the 2 field legions of Rosy Cloud City did not go south to confront the Leopard Tau army stationed at the border of the Chuanan province. Instead, they suddenly went north. What do you think? South of Rosy Cloud City was also a cunning person. They knew that they didn't have the strength to fight head-on with Great Xia. Seeing that the Great Xia army and Swordsman City were in a heated battle, south of Rosy Cloud City had the idea of fishing in troubled waters. With the help of the Mountain Sea Guards, Rosy Cloud City's reputation in the Xiangnan city was completely ruined. Since that was the case, south of Rosy Cloud City simply went all out and continued to implement internal annexation within the city-state. This time, south of Rosy Cloud City's target was Baoqing County in the north. As long as they took over Baoqing County, Rosy Cloud City would have 3 counties. In addition, the remaining Changsha County and Changde County were bordered by Danyang City. Basically, they would have the right to speak in the Xiangnan city. One had to admit that south of Rosy Cloud City had a good plan. The problem was, could Great Xia let Rosy Cloud City get what they wanted? Not to mention that Ouyang Shua didn't want a giant to appear in the northern region of the empire. There were many allies of Great Xia within the Xiangnan city. Since they were allies, Ouyang Shua couldn't leave them to die. The Leopard Army and the Mountain Sea Guards had long received orders to always pay attention to the movements of Rosy Cloud City. However, Ouyang Shua didn't expect that south of Rosy Cloud City would actually do the opposite this time, which was really surprising. In this way, they made a beautiful time difference. South of Rosy Cloud City's plan was to take over Baoqing County before Great Xia could react, creating an established fact. As for whether Great Xia would send troops to the north to avenge their ally, south of Rosy Cloud City had other means. On the 10th of October, the day before Shao Nianying returned to Dali, Bai Qi had just entered Sichuan and was still on his way to Swordsman City. On that day, the two field legions of Rosy Cloud City had already quietly assembled at the border. They brazenly invaded Baoqing County and took the initiative to provoke an internal war in the Xiangnan city. Previously, Rosy Cloud City's annexation was only done covertly. Before sending troops, they would always find various reasons to gain a foothold in morality. This time, it was simple and brutal. South of Rosy Cloud City didn't say anything at all. They directly sent troops to Baoqing County and caught Baoqing County off guard. On that day, a territory was taken by Rosy Cloud City. Looking at the situation, it was only a matter of time before Baoqing County fell. Because Baoqing County was located in the middle of the Xiangnan province, it was not connected to Great Xia. Even if Great Xia wanted to help, it was too far away. In addition, Lord Chunshan and south of Rosy Cloud City had a tacit understanding. Just as Rosy Cloud City was attacking Baoqing County, the two field legions of Danyang City suddenly went south and attacked Changsha County and Changde County. It seemed that the two of them wanted to divide the cake and divide the Xiangnan city together. What outsiders didn't know was that south of Rosy Cloud City was loyal to the Yan-Huang alliance in exchange for Lord Chuanshan's support. After Danyang City took over Changsha County and Changde County, they would transfer them to Rosy Cloud City. This move by the Yan-Huang alliance could be considered as smart. As the saying goes, be willing, you can only gain by giving up. The Yan-Huang alliance used two counties in exchange for an unprecedentedly powerful ally. It was worth it. If this went on, the Xiangnan city would definitely be destroyed and replaced by an even more powerful Rosy Cloud City. When Ouyang Shua heard the news, he was surprised and a little excited. South of Rosy Cloud, since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. Ouyang Shua was about to give the order to the Leopard Army to immediately attack the Xiangnan province and take advantage of the fact that Rosy Cloud City's army was not in the main city to destroy their nest. Unexpectedly, at this time, a piece of news spread. The Yan-Huang alliance officially accepted Rosy Cloud City as an official member, and both sides signed an alliance contract. When the news came out, the wilderness was in an uproar. This was an official member, and the first time the Yan-Huang alliance had accepted a new member since its establishment. When Ouyang Shua heard the news, his face instantly became gloomy. Chapter 954. For the Yan-Huang alliance to accept Rosy Cloud City at this time, it was obvious that it had been planned. If it was too early, it would easily expose the target and arouse the vigilance of the Great Xia. If it was too late, it would not serve as a deterrent to the Great Xia. If Great Xia attacked Rosy Cloud City now, the Yan-Huang alliance could send reinforcements at any time. What Ouyang Shua didn't know was that Di Chen and the others had even made up their minds to sacrifice Swordsman City to protect Rosy Cloud City. There were two reasons for this. Firstly, the Swordsman City's Feng family had always been outside of the Yan-Huang alliance's system. This time, they even sought the protection of the Shu Han dynasty, causing the Yan-Huang alliance to lose face. Di Chen had already planned to kick Swordsman City out of the alliance after the war. Compared to the Feng family, the player from south of Rosy Clouds was much easier to control. Secondly, compared to Swordsman City, which only occupied two counties, Rosy Cloud City, which was about to occupy the entire Xiangnan province, was undoubtedly a more capable ally. It could effectively curb the expansion of Great Xia in the central region. In other words, it also protected Danyang City. That was why Feng Qingyang was willing to send troops to assist Rosy Cloud City in attacking Changsha County and Changde County. These 2 points were enough for Di Chen and the others to support Rosy Cloud City. But in the end, they'd still underestimated Ouyang Shua's resolution, underestimated the will of the Grand Xia. October 11th, Shanghai City. Xiangnan Province was engulfed in flames of war, but Shanghai City was as prosperous as ever, unaffected by the war at all. Even the players living in Shanghai City were not worried about the war that was far away. Inside the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo summoned Military Affairs Minister Du Ruhui to discuss the matter of Rosy Cloud City. Does Kuming think that we should attack Rosy Cloud City? Du Ruhui's attitude was very firm. Reporting to Your Majesty, this humble subject thinks that we should immediately send troops. Reason? Firstly, the South Xiang province is located in the south. If Rosy Cloud City were to unify South Xiang and integrate into the Yan-Huang alliance system, then it would be a huge obstacle for the dynasty to unify the south and even the southwest. Secondly, the existence of Xiangnan province would pose a huge burden to the northern border defense of the dynasty. The border would at least double. You can be a thief for 1,000 days, but you can't guard against thieves for 1,000 days. Du Ruhui concluded, therefore, instead of being timid, it is better to take this opportunity to completely solve the problem of the southern Xiang city-state. As expected of Du Ruhui, her actions were decisive and straightforward. Ouyang Shuo nodded. Du Ruhui's thoughts coincided with his. Then he asked, at present, there are only 3 corps of the Leopard Troop deployed in the northern region. They have to guard against North Sichuan city-state, and also have to enter Xiangnan province to fight. The deployment of troops is somewhat stretched. How to solve this? The 4th Legion of the Hidden Leopard Army was ordered to guard Wanshi City, while the 5th Legion was stationed in Tianjing City, responsible for monitoring the satellite cities outside Tianjing City. Thus, only the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Legions were stationed at the border. Not to mention the reinforcements from the Yan-Huang alliance. Just the South Xiang province alone had 2 Rosy Cloud City and 2 Danyang City legions. If they wanted to take down Xiangnan province, it would probably be very difficult to rely on just the Leopard Tau army. Du Ruhui said, the satellite cities outside Tianjing City are already on the right track and are under the control of the Blood Shadow Alliance. We can dispatch the 5th Legion of the Hidden Leopard Army to the border and be responsible for monitoring North Sichuan city-state. The Tiger Leopard Cavalry led by Ma Chao has already completed the task of sweeping through Cloud City. The rest of the aftermath can be taken over by the 4th Imperial Guard Army. I suggest that the remaining 40,000 Tiger Leopard Cavalry be sent to Lingxi City as well. After meeting up with Ma Chao, we will head north together. Ouyang Shuo nodded. With the help of 2 large corps, the Battle of Xiangnan would be 70% certain. But Ouyang Shuo had always liked to cut the Gordian knot. He didn't want the Battle of Xiangnan to drag on for too long. It was already mid-October. All the battles had to be resolved before November. Otherwise, Ouyang Shuo's plan for the second voyage would be obstructed. A few days ago, the Navy Command had already completed the establishment of the Royal Fleet according to Ouyang Shuo's request. According to the establishment, the Royal Fleet would only be equipped with 1 Navy formation. It would be equipped with 40 Z-1 main battleships, 160 Mengmeng battleships, 500 Scarlet Horse boats, and a number of non-warships such as horse and grain ship. Other than that, there was Ouyang Shuo's new flagship, Emperor Yu. The keel of the flagship was the Black Dragon keel that Ouyang Shuo found on Dragon Island. It gave Emperor Yu a special attribute. The entire fleet had 22,000 soldiers and 3,000 crew members. It was only 1/5 of the regular fleet. Even so, the commander of the Royal Fleet was still given the position of Admiral of the Navy, which was equivalent to the commander of the 5 fleets. This was to show the extraordinary status and position of the Royal Fleet. After much consideration, Ouyang Shuo finally decided to promote Gan Ning, the commander of the Southern Border Fleet, to the position of Admiral of the Royal Fleet. Just yesterday, Gan Ning had already received orders to go to Beihai City to take over the fleet and be ready to set sail at any time. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shuo said leisurely, It seems like it's time to move Lord Shimen. Before the war started, Lord Shimen had sent a letter to Ouyang Shua, agreeing to help Great Xia incorporate the entire North Sichuan city-state into Great Xia's territory. At this point, it was time to fulfill his promise. Du Ruhui was shocked. Her eyes widened as she said, "Your Majesty, do you mean to solve the problems of the two city-states in one go?" This was even bigger than Du Ruhui had expected. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Since they don't know what's good for them, we might as well do something big and settle things once and for all. We'll completely take over the entire southwest region." South of Rosy Clouds was the leader of the South Xiangnan city-state. This time, they chose to betray the city-state and join forces with the Yellow Emperor Alliance. This undoubtedly shook the foundation of the South Xiangnan city-state. And the North Sichuan city-state had always shared weal and woe with the South Xiangnan city-state. If something happened to the South Xiangnan city-state, the North Sichuan city-state would inevitably be affected. Right now, the lords of the two city-states were like ants on a hot pan. They were so anxious that they didn't know what to do. With Lord Shimen adding fuel to the fire, it would be easy to destroy the two city-states in one fell swoop. Speaking of which, south of Rosy Clouds had helped Ouyang Shua a lot this time. "Your Majesty is wise." Du Ruhui couldn't help but admire him. This was the magnanimity of an emperor. Ouyang Shua said, "The Grand Council should hurry up and formulate a complete battle plan. Use all the resources that can be used." After such a long period of operation, the Great Xia was not without a foundation in the two city-states. If the Yellow Emperor Alliance underestimated the influence of the Great Xia in the city-states, they would definitely suffer a big loss. Yes. Du Ruhui nodded and left. He knew that there were many implications in this battle. He had to sort out the situation as soon as possible. He was afraid that he would have to work through the night again. The actions of Rosy Clouds City caused the two city-states that were originally outside of this battle to suddenly become turbulent. They were drawn into a huge whirlpool and could no longer escape. That night, more than 10 secret letters were sent to Ouyang Shua. These were all allies of the Great Xia in the two city-state. They were asking Ouyang Shua for advice on how to deal with the situation. Ouyang Shua naturally did not hesitate. He decisively drew his sword and gave clear instructions one by one. At the same time, he reiterated his promise to these lords in the letter to calm them down and embolden them. After receiving the reply, the confidence of these lords multiplied. It was as if they were witnessing the arrival of a new era. That night, the major territories began to assemble their troops and cooperate with the Great Xia army to complete a battle to overthrow the two city-states. In this battle, no one had a path of retreat. On the 12th of October, almost at the same time, a small portion of the territories of the South Xiang city-state and the North Chuanbei city-state publicly announced that they would withdraw from their respective city-states and voluntarily join the rule of the Great Xia dynasty. As such, the only two major city-states in the China region suddenly disintegrated in a single day. The once flourishing era of city-states had suddenly come to an end, and they would withdraw from the stage of history. When the news came out, the players in the China region were filled with emotions. They felt as if they were witnessing a historical era. With the sudden disintegration of the two city-states, a pure warring states era had quietly arrived in the wilderness. The following wilderness would purely be the stage for the Mountain and Sea Alliance and the Yellow Emperor Alliance. Even the supporting roles were gone. The two alliances were destined to face off against each other. And every time they fought, there would be giants falling. For example, Swordsman City. After the players sighed, they couldn't suppress their excitement. This was because the signal was too obvious. In the face of the provocation of Rosy Cloud City and the Yellow Emperor Alliance, the Great Xia dynasty had accepted the challenge. While the battle in Swordsman City was still in suspense, the two giants of the China region had unexpectedly opened up an even larger battlefield and launched a life and death battle that no one had expected. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious. This epic battle that had swept the entire wilderness was ushering in the most exciting moment. Every player in the China region who was paying attention to the situation in the wilderness and current affairs had their eyes wide open, for fear of missing the exciting moment. The major media had even sent teams of war reporters to follow up and report at any time. Even the foreign countries were paying attention to this battle in the China region. For no other reason but because one of the protagonists of this battle was the Great Xia dynasty, which was closely related to them and wanted to rule the four seas. Almost at the same time these territories made the announcement, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd legions of the Leopard Army of the Great Xia dynasty, under the command of the commander of the Leopard Army, Han Xian, brazenly invaded the territory of Rosy Cloud City under the banner of protecting their allies. The 5th Legion of the Leopard Army and the 2nd Legion of the Imperial Guards, one by one, received the order and led their troops north. After receiving the news, the territories in the Xiangnan province that had been attacked by Rosy Cloud City and Danyang City, as if they had received their savior, quickly assembled and resolutely resisted the invasion, determined to persist until the arrival of the Great Xia dynasty's reinforcements. And almost at the same time as the Leopard Army set out, Di Chen and the others issued an announcement in the name of the Yellow Emperor Alliance, declaring that they would not sit idly by and watch Rosy Cloud City be invaded by the Great Xia dynasty. The poor swordsman city once again became a wild child that no one cared about. The eyes of the entire China region were attracted by the two provinces in the southwest, sitting and watching the battle between the Great Xia dynasty and the Yellow Emperor Alliance. Even more shocking news happened at noon that day. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.